Chapter 633 Self-Exploding Spirit Tools. Chapter 633 Self-Exploding Spirit Tools. Faced with an authentic saber ray, what more when it was a saber ray that was formed from a total of 30 flashes of chi? Not even Ling Han dared to take it head-on. Ray was something surpassing chi, an absolute domination, and a cutting edge that was unbelievably sharp, able to slice apart all in its path. Even if Ling Han had managed to form the body of Iron Sheet, he dared not try to take this strike head-on. After all, this battle was not a mere spar, but could possibly develop into a full-blown duel to the death. He smiled calmly and said, "You have improved, so how could it be that I have not?" Z. A flash of lightning flickered over his body, and he instantly disappeared from where he had originally been, standing at a speed so fast that his movements could not be seen with the naked eye. An expression of surprise appeared on Xianyuan Ziguang's face. What kind of movement technique was that? How could it be so fast? Before he had made a move, he had already calculated Ling Han's battle prowess in advance, and he believed that after he had combined his chi into Ray, he could force Ling Han into a retreat in defeat. Ling Han should not even have the strength to parry his attacks. But he had never thought that after a mere few months, Ling Han's movement technique would actually have improved to a whole different level. Indeed, he was not the only one who had improved. "It's more than enough to kill you." Xianyuan Ziguang sneered. He drew his saber and slashed forth. This time, the saber ray shone brilliantly and was as long as 300 meters. It transformed into something that resembled a waterfall and swept towards Ling Han. "Is that so?" Ling Han turned into a flash of lightning, and as he used the demon fairy steps, he was as slippery as a fish, moving as nimbly as he liked. Moving his left arm into the form of a bow, his right hand pulled on empty air, and instantly, an arrow formed of origin power appeared. It was completely white, but exuded a frightening cold air. Exterminating Dragon Star Arrow. Go. With a light humph, the arrow of origin power shot out. In a flash, it had arrived in front of Xianyuan Ziguang's chest. One shouldn't underestimate this single arrow, as it had the combined force of 3 different mystical powers. The Eye of Truth saw through to the weakest point in Xianyuan Ziguang's defenses. It was followed by the activation of the exterminating Dragon Star Arrow, which was then sped up with the power of lightning, increasing the speed of this arrow to its maximum, which at the same time was shot towards the point that Xianyuan Ziguang would find the most difficult to defend. Xianyuan Ziguang paled drastically, and at the first possible moment activated his bloodline inheritance. Endless flames surged out from within his body, and in an instant he had surpassed the level of the flower blossom tier and stepped onto the plane of the spiritual infant tier. Ancient divine beasts such as true dragons and true phoenixes roared around him. He looked like a son of heaven that had descended onto the mortal plane, with the air of a supreme ruler. Pooh! The arrow hit its target, yet did not pierce through Xianyuan Ziguang's chest. There wasn't even a sign of blood. It merely tore through the part of the clothing that covered his chest and revealed a navy blue armor. It was currently shining brightly and had forcefully disintegrated the arrow of origin power. Ha 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 ha. Destiny rides on my shoulders, and I can even pick up treasures while walking on the road. Since I am destined, how could I possibly be defeated in your hand? Xianyuan Ziguang declared, laughing wildly. With a wave of his right hand, 36 treasured sabers of various shapes and sizes flew out and surrounded Ling Han. "Heaven Star Annihilating Saber Array!" he shouted. "Here it is again. Every time you throw a move, you must announce its name. Don't you get annoyed?" Ling Han mocked, though he did not dare to show the least bit of carelessness in his expression. This saber array was considerably terrifying and possessed the ability to pose a threat to him. "Tell me the location of Hellion Sun Shui, or I will definitely kill you." Xianyuan Ziguang took control of the saber array without immediately releasing its might, and merely looked coldly upon Ling Han. "You're crazy!" Ling Han refused in disdain. He drew his long sword, and the desolate hell sword displayed its awesome power, standing steadfast against the terrifying saber intent. So you are planning to ask for trouble?" Xianyuan Ziguang declared coldly and manipulated the saber array to charge at Ling Han. Ling Han brandished his sword to parry the oncoming attack, but Xianyuan Ziguang was really very strong. Under the attack of saber ray, ferocious light was all that was left within the saber array, and every streak of light could become a mortal threat to any flower blossom tier cultivator. No, even spiritual infant tier cultivators would be shaken. That was saber ray after all, and the destructive power it possessed was really too terrifying. Qi and Ray were on two completely different levels, just like how there was a large difference of power between flower blossom and spiritual infant tiers. Ling Han was having a really tough time staying on the defense. Thankfully, not only was he nimble, his defenses were also very shockingly powerful. Firstly, he had origin power, which he could form into a defense. Additionally, he also had a physique on the level of Tier 6 treasure metal, and even if these two layers were penetrated, he still had the indestructible Heaven Scroll circulating inside his body, which would allow him to instantly heal majority of his injuries. Worst come to worst, he still had 6 drops of indestructible true fluid, which was more than enough to revive him quite a number of times. The saber ray ripped forth, and Ling Han cut a very sorry figure. These 36 sabers should belong to a whole set, and belonged to some great cultivator from ancient times, yet had, for some reason, fallen into Xianyuan Ziguang's hands. Just like this guy had said, he could easily pick up treasures by merely going outside, so he was born with great luck. "Fuck, do you think you're the only one with treasures?" Ling Han humphed and said, "Just some pieces of scrap metal. Just see as I take them all in. Just continue to brag." Xianyuan Ziguang sneered coldly. "Tell me the location of Hellion Sun Shui." He could really be considered a romantic. It was apparent that Hellion Sun Shui had not paid him much attention, but he still was deeply in love with her. Ling Han flipped his right hand and drew out the Heaven Transformation Bowl. "Take them." He activated the treasured item, and instantly multiple interwoven patterns appeared. Wang. The stone bowl instantly rose into the air and shone with endless light. "Xiao, xiao, xiao." Immediately, 3 treasured sabers were taken in. What? Everyone was struck, completely dumb. They could all plainly see the might of the saber array. Yet this stone bowl that Ling Han had drawn out could actually destroy the saber array and take in the treasured sabers. It was really an unbelievable sight. Xianyuan Ziguang was even more dumbfounded. He was very clear about the power that these 36 treasured sabers had. After they were taken in by that stone bowl, he had completely lost all contact with them, as if they had completely disappeared from this plane of existence. "Xiao, xiao, xiao." A stone bowl did not have any kind of emotions. It merely continued to take in the treasured sabers, and in the time for a few breaths, it had taken in another 7 sabers. This is, Nong Man's beautiful eyes shone. She recognized that this was the bottom of that refined celestial bottle, which was something that she had her eye on. She had never thought that it was actually a stone bowl and would actually possess such powerful might. Her desire to obtain it increased. Wang Yiyan's eyes narrowed as well. She imagined that if her senior brother Leng could obtain this treasure, he would be like a tiger that had grown wings. Even the little Saber King, Yao Huiyu or Dong Ling would easily be swept aside by senior brother disciple Leng's might. However, how would she be able to obtain this treasure? Ling Han would bend to neither force nor persuasion, and was not that easily handled. Xianyuan Ziguang hardened his heart and shouted, "Explode!" Wang, the remaining 26 treasured sabers, shone with a sharp light at the same time, and the patterns on their blades spread out as if they were cobwebs before instantly vanishing. The spirit tool would self-explode. Ling Han was astonished what kind of spirit tool was capable of exploding by itself. Only those spirit tools that had formed their own tool spirits. But since they had formed their own tool spirits, the latter would be similar to ordinary living creatures, wherein life was their most important priority. Unless in desperate straits, they would definitely not self-explode. For example, the Black Tower. If Ling Han actually wanted Small Tower to explode itself, just see if Small Tower would actually pay him any attention. But with the command of Xianyuan Ziguang, these spirit tools all chose to explode at the same time, as if he was the ruler of the spirit tools. Now that his command was announced, they were unable to refuse. These spirit tools were level 7 treasures and were unable to express their full might in Xianyuan Ziguang's hands. But the moment they exploded themselves, just imagine if 26 high-level spiritual infant tier cultivators chose to use their full might and unleash a move that would kill themselves along with their enemies. How terrifying would the power of this blow be? Without another word, Ling Han rode on lightning and tried his best to break out of the siege. Chapter 634 Music of the Qin. Chapter 634 Music of the Qin. Pung! 26 treasured sabers exploded at the same time and instantly became a blinding light in the skies. The terrifying power of the explosion descended, and pung, 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 this side courtyard of the Wang clan was instantly reduced to rubble. So what if they were in the flower blossom tier? Faced with the shockwave, they were all spitting up mouthfuls of blood, and spiritual pedestal tier cultivators were even worse off. In the best-case scenario, some were completely covered with blood, whereas those who came off worse had their bones broken and ligaments torn. Being equivalent to 26 high-level spiritual infant tier elite cultivators sacrificing their lives in a full-out attack, the power of this strike was naturally very terrifying. Zhu Xianer was still all right as she had 3 spiritual infant tier cultivators, who were more than enough to nullify all the power of this shockwave by her side. Hunyo was even more special. With a wave of her tiny hands, she had sliced apart the shockwave, which split into 2 halves which passed on either side of her and did not manage to hurt a single hair on her head. Very far away, Ling Han appeared. His face was pale, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. However, a pleased expression appeared on his face. The Heaven Transformation Bowl had taken in 10 treasured sabers, and by this time had completely refined all of them, and they had now become a pool of liquid metal. He poured the liquid out, and it rapidly solidified to become a block of metal. He weighed it in his hand. It was about 50 kilograms in weight. However, compared with the total weight of the 10 treasured sabers, it had at least been lightened by 100 times. This was the use of the Heaven Transformation Bowl Purification. They had been level 7 treasured sabers previously, and now that they had been purified, they should reach level 8. However, as this block of metal had become a mixture of various metals, not even Ling Han was sure what he should call this metal anymore. Never mind, it was still a level 8 precious metal in any case, so he would be able to forge a considerable number of arrows from it again. He circulated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and the injuries on his body were immediately erased. He smiled faintly and said, "Wealth-delivering boy, do you have any other treasures to gift to your grandfather?" Xianyuan Ziguang was thrown into a flying rage. How could he have wanted to gift treasures to Ling Han? He had just not thought that Ling Han would have been able to draw out a strange stone bowl, which was able to easily break through his saber array. He had made the sabers self-destruct purely because he would rather destroy them rather than gift them to Ling Han. But even in doing so, he was not able to inflict a serious wound on Ling Han, which caused him to feel strong dejection. Ling Han decided not to kill off Xianyuan Ziguang. This man had luck in defiance of the natural order. Merely going outdoors, there would be treasures crashing down right in front of him. Thus, Ling Han would just let treasures continue crashing down on him so that he'd be able to once again loot him. This was akin to planting garlic chives. If he pulled out even the roots, he would only be able to harvest once. However, if he left the roots behind, he'd be able to harvest again and again. If only Xianyuan Ziguang knew of Ling Han's thoughts. It was a wonder how he would feel then. Wang Yin looked at the whole area of destruction, and though a slight smile was still on her beautiful face, there was an additional flash of killing intent in her eyes. A grand, proper banquet was ruined just like that by Ling Han and Xianyuan Ziguang. However, Xianyuan Ziguang was one of her own, so if she wanted anyone to hate, she could only hate Ling Han. Brother Ling, I've already said as such just now. If you will not recognize my senior brother-disciple as the alliance leader, then Yiyun shall battle you in place of my senior brother-disciple. With a wave of her silky sleeve, her manner was refined and elegant, just as if she was a deity. Ling Han glanced at her, then smiled and said, "Do you, too, plan to make a gamble with me?" "That stone bowl." Wang Yun pointed with a slender finger. "If I win, you will give that stone bowl to me." Ling Han pondered for a moment, then said, "All right, then if you lose, you must accept my brother's marriage proposal." He pointed at Mu Rongqing. "Pay, I don't want to marry this ugly girl." Mu Rongqing jumped up in anger. "Don't keep putting me on the spot." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "AI, there's nothing to be done. My brother does not like you, so just offer some kind of precious metal or spirit herb as a stake." "How dare you!" Quite a number of young men shouted in rage. Ling Han actually dared to desecrate their goddess. Wang Yun, on the other hand, was extremely calm and casually tossed out a spirit herb and said, "This is Danyang Phoenix Cryegrass. Amongst 7th-tier spirit herbs, it can still be considered something of high quality. Would this be enough?" "Just passable." Ling Han nodded. Putting aside level 7 spirit herbs, not even 10th-tier divine herbs could compare to the Heaven Transformation Bowl, but he had full confidence he would win, so it would be fine even if he would earn less from this wager. Wang Yun continued, "However, since that stone bowl is your stake, I would like Brother Ling to put it to a side. Yun is worried that if Brother Ling loses, you would not admit your defeat." This woman was very shrewd. For Ling Han, the stone bowl was a very powerful spirit tool. In the face of Xianyuan Ziguang's terrifyingly powerful saber ray, he could still shatter it, but now, with a mere few words from Wang Yin, this item could not be used. She indeed had an artful thought, as well as meticulous thoughts. Ling Han laughed loudly and casually tossed the stone bowl to one side. Then he said, "You are very smart, but be careful. Do not go for wool and come home shorn." Wang Yun smiled slightly, and with a wave of her hands, a chain appeared in front of her. It looked to be extremely ancient, and there was a great number of armored warriors engraved on it. They were currently shown to be fighting a bloody battle, which was slightly misfitting. She sat in midair, her figure slowly rising, and said, "Please listen to a song from me, Brother Ling." Wang. With a move of her hands, the sound of the qin immediately surged out in waves. It was gentle and melodious, as if the sound of nature. Everyone looked captivated and dazzled. Wang Yun possessed outstanding beauty, and coupled with her extraordinary skills with the qin, she indeed had the charm to enchant countless people. The sound of the qin spread out, and slight confusion appeared in Ling Han's eyes. She wanted to disturb his heart. A cold smirk immediately appeared on Ling Han's face. She was really too naive. He was one who possessed a sliver of divine sense of heaven tier, and she, a mere spiritual infant tier, cultivator, wanted to enchant him. Chong! The sound of the qin suddenly changed from its previous gentle, beautiful state to a harsh tone, as if there was an ambush around every corner, and war was on the verge of breaking out. Wang. Those fully armored warriors on the body of the Qin shone respectively, and as the music of the Qin rose and fell, they actually walked out and stood one by one in midair. There was a total of 81, and each one of them had the might of a high-level spiritual infant tier cultivator. This Qin was actually a spirit tool as well, and could summon 81 spiritual infant tier elite cultivators. What a shock! No wonder Wang Yiyun devised a scheme for Ling Han to set the Heaven Transformation Bowl to a side. She feared that her treasured Qin would be suppressed by the Heaven Transformation Bow. Now, with the appearance of 81 high-level spiritual infant tier cultivators, how was he supposed to block them? One had to know that they were mere summons of a spirit tool, so they held no fear of death or injury, and could be claimed to be similar to the likes of corpse soldiers, as they were the most loyal of deadly soldiers. These warriors were attired in extremely sturdy full armor, and wielded various weapons in their hands. Multiple patterns shone, and without the slightest hesitation, they charged towards Ling Han in attack. Everyone felt as if they were about to suffocate. Previously, there were only 36 treasured sabers, but now there were 81 spiritual infant tier warriors, which was even more impossible to stand against. Ling Han, on the other hand, was not afraid. Xianyuan Ziguang, in a single breath, drew out a total of 36 level 7 spirit tools, and these 81 spiritual infant tier warriors in front of him now were merely birthed by a single treasure, so their might could not be compared to the former. He drew the demon birth sword directly. Wasn't it just a competition of spirit tools? Who would cower? Wang, the patterns on the demon birth sword lit up. 1, 2, 3. There was one more. Don't look down on it for simply having one additional pattern lit up. This was a level 10 spirit tool, so how could just having one additional pattern light up grant too little power? Immediately, an endless aura of might spread out. Ling Han stood with a sword in hand as if he was a great demon king, exuding an extremely terrifying aura which completely suppressed all 81 spiritual infant tier warriors. Chapter 635, Repeated Appearance of Ultimate Techniques. Chapter 635, Repeated Appearance of Ultimate Techniques. Everyone was struck with disbelief. 81 spiritual infant tier soldiers should have the might to overturn rivers and empty oceans. But Ling Han had merely drawn out a treasured sword, and it was enough to make the figures of those soldiers quiver as if they were on the verge of being destroyed. This was suppression of a whole different level. Level 8, or perhaps even a level 9 spirit tool, someone exclaimed in a shaking voice. Spirit tools were not common, ordinary weapons, but treasured tools that, on the foundation of being forged from level 7 precious metals, followed by the cultivation by one's martial intent, possessed supreme power. The power of these spirit tools was very terrifying, and even when wielded by flower blossom tier cultivators, they were capable of possessing the might of the spiritual infant tier. For example, that Qin of Wang Yiyun definitely had to be a 7th tier spirit tool to be capable of releasing 81 spiritual infant tier warriors. Although they were not physically real, their might was not inferior to the real thing, and they had no fear of death or injury. And the higher the level of the spirit tool, the more difficult it was to complete it. That was because there were so many powerful people in this world, and cultivating a spirit tool would at least be a matter of a few dozen years, and as time passed, the martial intent inside could possibly be erased as well. That was unless the spirit tool managed to form its own tool spirit that would allow it to automatically take an energy from the surroundings, and ensure that the martial intent inside would not be worn down, but rather be destroyed only with the destruction of the spirit tool itself. Thus, when the two of them showed off their high-level spirit tools, this was a great shock to the masses. This was a power display for a party. Otherwise, even if you possessed a level 7 or level 8 precious metal, so what? You would only be able to forge a weapon of this level, but it would not possess the power of a spirit tool. An apparent change in expression finally appeared on Wang Yiyun's face. The demon birth sword put on her a huge pressure, causing her to no longer feel as confident as she had been at the beginning. How could the spiritual infant tear lose to the flower blossom tear? She felt very vexed. When geniuses reached the peak of the flower blossom tier, they were indeed capable of defeating some low-level or even mid-level spiritual infant tier cultivators, and she indeed was only in the second layer of spiritual infant tier, but her battle prowess had reached 10 stars, and no matter how she looked at it, she was at an absolute advantage in this battle. She definitely couldn't allow herself to be scared off by her opponent. Her playing of the qin became even faster, and the notes transformed into a powerful army. The 81 spiritual infant tier soldiers instantly regained their divine might as if fresh blood had been pumped into them, and they charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han, meanwhile, smiled calmly. Followed by the increase of his comprehension level in the sword arts, he had finally unlocked another pattern on the demon birth sword, and had increased the power of this level 10 spirit tool by another level. What kind of concept was a level 10 spirit tool? With the full release of its power, it was equivalent to the might of a shattering void tier ultimate elite. He waved his sword and hung. 29 flashes of sword chi combined to form a pseudo-ray. With a PU, it slashed at a spiritual infant tier soldier. That soldier hurriedly used his battle spear to parry. But this pseudo-ray had been struck by a level 10 spirit tool, so the destructive power behind the strike was even more terrifying than a real ray. That soldier, along with his weapon, was immediately slashed in half by this strike. One strike, and it was enough to kill off a spiritual infant tier soldier. Hiss! Everyone inhaled sharply. Their only thought was that Ling Han was strong to a spine-chilling extent. If Ling Han had been a nature-defying monster like Yao Huiyu or the Little Saber King, then they would still have been able to accept it. After all, these guys had all broken through to the spiritual infant tier, and with their battle prowess they were naturally capable of sweeping aside all opponents in the same cultivation level as them. The problem was that Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier. Ling Han continued to endlessly brandish his sword, and one wave meant one opponent would be downed. He was definitely capable of standing strong and continuously brandishing his sword 81 times, and those 81 soldiers were completely slashed apart. Logically speaking, they did not have physical bodies, so naturally should have no vital points, and should be able to reform even after being sliced in half and continue battling. But the sword ray unleashed with the demon birth sword naturally contained the might of a level 10 spirit tool. So how could they possibly piece themselves back together? Naturally, their only fate was to be erased. Wah! Wang Yun spat out a mouthful of blood. Her beautiful eyes filled with shock. She had long since refined this treasured qin, so her heart and spirit were joined with it. Now that the 81 soldiers had been sliced in half and destroyed, she was also harmed. She felt as if her heart was on fire, feeling incredibly awful. She was defiant, and with a light pat on her treasured qin, when a sharp sword actually shot out from inside the qin. This sword was extremely thin, and the blade was like a string on the qin. If one did not look closely, one would not be able to see it at all. Wang Yum struck out with her sword, and the blade that seemed akin to a string from the qin actually turned into a silk thread that charged to entwine Ling Han. Furthermore, it seemed endless. Like the blood-sucking origin gold, it could be endlessly lengthened. But this sword had not been forged from the blood-sucking origin gold. Thus the sword chi and origin power she shot out had combined in an amazing way, and headed to entwine Ling Han as if she had spread out a large net over him. This is the Wang clan's ultimate art, falling shadow twining silk sword technique. Years ago, this was the ultimate art the ancestor of the Wang clan used to move unhindered in the world. I'd never imagined that Wang Yin would have already learned it. She really deserves the title of genius. Fairy Wang, cut this brat in half. Everyone was exclaiming in shock, and a greater number of people was cheering Wang Yin on. They naturally hoped that this fairy would be able to emerge victorious. Interesting, Ling Han murmured, and with a shake of his right hand, fierce sword chi swept out of the demon birth sword, which easily sliced apart the sword threads around him. As long as the power gap was not too big, a level 10 spirit tool naturally possessed an overwhelming advantage. Wang Yun soared up, her white robes floating around her as if she was the fairy of the moon who was dancing gracefully. However, every slash of her sword gave rise to a fierce flash of sword chi, soaring in various arcs towards Ling Han, which made for a bizarre sight. Ling Han used the thunderclap ninth heaven, and his battle prowess spiked greatly, reaching 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier. He charged towards Wang Yin. Ding, 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 ding. The two swords clashed against one another endlessly, a terrifying light blooming as a result. Even flower blossom tier cultivators dared not stare continuously at the sight, fearing that their eyes would be blinded as a consequence. Wang Yun paled in shock. With every exchange, her body would feel numb as if she had been electrocuted. The feeling was so awful that she almost felt on the verge of spitting up blood. Even her origin power was routed, and she was unable to release her full power. In a head-on confrontation, she was actually inferior to a flower blossom tier cultivator. One could only say that the thunderclap ninth heaven was really too forceful, so strong that it was capable of seriously subduing even a super genius the likes of Wang Yin. Ling Han dominated Wang Yun in battle, and in a mere few dozen moves, her sword was sent flying from her hands. Wang Yun gritted her teeth, and pulling out a hair clip, threw it into the air. Instantly, a crystal-clear light shone from it, which rapidly enlarged until it was about 10 feet long, appearing like a very strange-looking boat. Ling Han frowned and said, "If you continue to pester me, I'll spank your behind." Wang Yun was embarrassed and infuriated, so how was it possible that she would listen? She continued to control the hair clip, and origin power focused at its tip. It became a ball of light that exuded a terrifying aura as if it was capable of destroying the earth and heavens. Disobedient. The light of thunder flickered on Ling Han's body. He was as of yet unable to transform into lightning, but his speed had spiked up by a whole 3 times, and in a flash he had appeared above Wang Yin. The demon birth sword swept down and struck directly on Wang Yun's star. "Ah!" Wang Yun shouted in shock, firstly, due to the pain, and secondly, due to shame. This man actually really dared to spank her behind. However, she was still a prodigy of this generation. Even in such a situation, she still continued to control the hair clip to shoot out an attack towards Ling Han. Xiao! A flash of light shot out with incredible destructive power behind it. Ling Han slashed out with his full power, completely destroying this flash of light, yet felt a numbing in his right hand, so much that he almost could not raise it back up again. He could not help but be surprised. One had to know that his physique was of an extremely shocking level, but after facing such a strike, he would actually feel so bad. This hair clip was really extraordinary. Pa, pa, pa. He repeatedly spanked Wang Yun's star. Chapter 636. Zhu Xian Air Breaks Through. Chapter 636. Zhu Xian Air Breaks Through. Everyone was dumbstruck. That was Wang Yin, a publicly acknowledged fairy. Moreover, she was also the treasured daughter of the Wang clan, as well as an outstanding disciple of the Blue Thunder sect. And now, she actually had her behind spanked by a man. This. So envious. They very much wanted to spank her once too, but they wouldn't be using a sword, but rather their bare hand to truly feel the plumpness and bounciness of that star. A considerable number even began cursing Ling Han secretly. He did not take more advantage, even when gifted with such a great opportunity. Was he stupid? Since he had already formed an enmity with the Wang clan, what was the point of acting reserved? Who knew, if it was too late to change anything, Fairy Wang would fall wholeheartedly for him. But even more people bristled with fury. This brat actually dared to commit a blasphemy against the goddess of their heart. She truly deserved to die 100 times. Wang Yin could not help but exclaim in shock as well. To have her behind spanked publicly like this was an experience she had never had before. She felt ashamed and enraged to death. But what made her feel helpless was that she was completely no match for Ling Han and could only allow the latter to torment her backside. Ah, she released an embarrassed cry, but finally made no further attempts to continue fighting back. With a flash of her figure, she had returned to the ground. Her expression had regained its previous serenity, and she had once again become the otherworldly fairy that she had been before. "You admit your defeat?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Wang Yin's eyes spat fire, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han into a million pieces. But what could she do since she was no match for him? Though there were a few spiritual infant-tier cultivators present, their prowess was more or less on the same level as hers. Since she was no match for Ling Han, she believed that no one else would be able to suppress this young man. She forced down her fury as she still had to maintain her calm, fairy-like demeanor and said, "Yin is not skilled enough. Thus, I admit my loss." Ling Han grabbed her gambling stake, smiling calmly, and asked, "Now, is there anyone else who would like to stop me from leaving?" No one spoke. Ling Han was really too strong. He should be in existence on the level of monsters, and only the likes of Yao Huiyu and the Little Saber King, the strongest prodigies of their generation, would be able to subdue him. Even if anyone else wanted to step up to the challenge, they would only be seeking a thrashing. "Let's go. We'll change locations and drink to our heart's content," Ling Han said to the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing. "All right." Both of them nodded. They left in a grand display, making many eyes spit fire at them. They ate, thrashed, played, and now decided to leave just like that, leaving behind shambles and a mess in their wake. Wang Yin, too, wanted to slam the door and leave, but she was the host here and still had to take charge of the overall situation. So how could she do as she liked? She could only open her mouth and say, "Everyone, let us discuss the details of the striking Heaven Alliance." Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, and Mu Rongqing arrived at the mountain peak. They found clean rock, then brought out good wine and food, and began to eat heartily. Additionally, they also plucked over a dozen bowl-sized peaches from that branch of spiritual peach. Their fragrance wafted all over, making them all salivate at the aroma. This is what good food is. As Hunyao ate, she gave her judgment. She was wolfing down so much that her little face and hands were all oily. Zhu Xian'er, meanwhile, was very reserved, taking small bites and swallowing slowly, displaying fully the demeanor of a refined lady. The three men all had grand ambitions and forthright character. Due to their drunken stupor, they decided to simply recognize each other as brothers. The Rain Emperor was naturally ranked the eldest, Mu Rongqing was second eldest, and Ling Han could only settle for being the youngest, which made him feel very dejected once he had come out of his drunkenness. With his 2 lifetimes added together, he was over 200 years old, and now he actually had to call 2 young men first brother and second brother. Feng Piyin was another story, as he indeed was older than him, so it was no loss to him to call the former big brother. Still, he only felt momentary depression. Even if they had recognized each other as brothers while they were drunk, that was still because the temperament and character of the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing were to his taste. Actually, Uncle Rabbit, too, wanted to join in on the fun. It said it had lived for several hundred years, so it wanted to become the first brother. As a result, Ling Han and the other 2 looked at it in disdain and said they would be ashamed to be grouped together with an animal, and so pushed it out of consideration, making it cry out in fury. Although Wang Yun meant to keep the event secret, there had been many witnesses, and added with the fact that it was about a spanking, such a captivating subject, news about what had happened the day before very quickly spread all over. When they spoke of Wang Yin, everyone would give an "oh" and share an expression of mutual understanding. Naturally, the gossip became more overblown as it spread. At the beginning, it was a mere spanking, but as the gossip spread, it became that Wang Yiyun had been captured by Ling Han, and the young man and woman spent a night together alone. When Wang Yiyun came out, her clothes were disheveled, and she couldn't even close her legs. However, at the same time, Ling Han's battle prowess was sufficiently acknowledged. Everyone was sure that unless the greatest prodigies that had obtained a direct ticket into the Restore Heaven Academy made an appearance, no one else would be a match for Ling Han. Furthermore, they would have to be someone like Small Saber King or Lang Yutian. If they were not that powerful, they couldn't be too weak either. Still, in such a way, Ling Han was considered to have clearly established an opposition with the Blue Thunder sect. The disciples of the other 4 ancient great sects also maintained an acceptable distance from him, so he was unable to act on the plans he had about befriending 1 or 2 disciples of an ancient great sect in order to get hold of an ancient map. However, he found Kenyi and had him act on this plan in his stead. Anyways, it was just a map and no treasure map either, so in his thoughts it shouldn't be too difficult of an undertaking. After another 3 days, an important moment arrived for Zhu Xian'er. She was about to break through to the flower blossom tier. Actually, since 1 or 2 months ago, she was ready to break through, but Ling Han had her try her utmost to perfect the foundations of her cultivation before breaking through. After all, this was the first step of transcending mortality, so it was extremely important. However, there were really too many cultivation resources available to her when staying by Ling Han's side. Thus, in just a short amount of time, she had polished her cultivation in the spiritual pedestal tier to an incredibly sturdy level, and with no way to make her foundations any stronger, she began breaking through. Because she had really accumulated a lot of energy, and also because Ling Han had prepared a large amount of alchemical pills and spirit fruits for her, her breakthrough was smooth as well. In less than half a day's time, she had planted the spiritual seeds, and 3 days later, the divine flowers bloomed, and she had officially entered into the flower blossom tier. Zhu Xian'er was extremely happy. Advancing into the flower blossom tier not only meant that she had taken a very important step on the path of martial arts and that she could fly with her own power, or that she no longer needed to depend on normal food as nutrition, but most importantly, it meant she had obtained an additional 200 years of lifespan, which had drastically slowed down the rate of aging for her. This meant that in the following few dozen years, not only would her beauty not decline, she would even look younger. For women, especially one that could definitely be considered an extreme beauty, what other reward would be better than that? How many divine flowers have you managed to cultivate? Ling Han asked. He was more concerned about Zhu Xian'er's future potential. After all, she was one of the strongest prodigies of the North region, so she had better not neglect her martial arts and affect her advancement because of him. 3 flowers, Zhu Xian'er said, pleasant surprise all over her face. Ordinarily speaking, flower blossom tier cultivators should only be able to cultivate a single divine flower, and only geniuses would be able to cultivate 2, and those that managed to cultivate 3 were definitely considered the geniuses amongst geniuses. With every additional divine flower, one would be able to borrow double the natural energy of the world when they attacked. Furthermore, flower blossom tier cultivators managed to transcend immortality by depending on natural energy. Thus, an additional divine flower did not mean a slight increase to one's battle prowess, but a complete upgrade. Ling Han nodded. 3 flowers was not too bad, and she could be considered one of the top geniuses with this feat, however, for the likes of Yao Huiyu and Small Saber King. They definitely did not have merely 3 flowers. They could possess 4 or even 5 or 6. Nonetheless, he believed that 6 flowers had to be the limit. In case of someone like him, who had 10 flowers, that was because he possessed 2 spiritual oceans and 2 spiritual pedestals, which was an incredibly unique condition. There should be no one else capable of achieving the same as he. Chapter 637, Buying Million Treasure City. Chapter 637, Buying Million Treasure City. In truth, Ling Han, too, could try breaking through to the spiritual infant tier, but he chose to delay it. In his last life, he was only concerned with pursuing advancement through cultivation levels, but in this life, he naturally would not be so rash. Instead, he wanted to perfect his cultivation on every cultivation level before he chose to begin breaking through. Anyways, he was still young, not even 20 years old yet, so there was no need for him to rush. He wanted to form 30 flashes of sword chi and develop the indestructible heaven scroll until the diamond tier before breaking through to the spiritual infant tier. This way, when he raised his spiritual infant, it would be tempered by his sword ray and supported by the indestructible heaven scroll, so it would be indestructible. However, 29 flashes of sword chi had been recognized as the ultimate limit since ancient times. Even mysterious 3,000 was only 3,000 and not 3,001, which showed how very difficult it was to breach this gap. Furthermore, it was also extremely difficult to form body of diamond. Ling Han had eaten so many natural treasures, but his body was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much he ate, there was no one instance that his body was filled to the brim. Of course, one reason for that was also because he had cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant art, so a lot of essence had been used up on the improvement and strengthening of his physique. On Kenya's side, it was proceeding very smoothly. With the various alchemical pills and treasures that Ling Han provided, he had cultivated an image of himself as the spoilt young master of some hidden great clan, brandishing his various treasures and casually throwing them at others. He looked completely like an idiot who was practically inviting others to con him. He befriended a true disciple of the Heaven Sword sect, and using various alchemical pills and precious ingredients to pave the way, he threw so much at the latter that he was extremely willing to declare Kenyi his brother. When Kenyi saw that it was about time, he threw out the secret of the ancient treasure map and asked him to take out an ancient map so that they could make a comparison and retrieve the treasure together. That true disciple naturally agreed happily. Anyways, there were still over 4 months until the opening of the academy, so there was completely enough time for him to make a return trip. Now, the only thing left was to wait. Another few days passed, and the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had returned. They had been training all this time in the mountains, improving themselves through continuous battles with the most ferocious of beasts, and also earning some pocket money in the meantime. After all, spiritual infant tier demonic beasts were extremely valuable, as their blood, hide, flesh, and bones could all be sold for high prices. However, now they handed all their gains over to Ling Han because only in his hands would they get the most out of these things. Ling Han had never mistreated his own people before, and naturally gave without any reservations to these 2 sworn brothers of his. They could enjoy as they liked the food ingredients and various nutritious foods inside the Black Tower, as well as spiritual fluids. These were all extremely nutritious and nourishing items, and could rapidly speed up the accumulation of origin power. For 2 geniuses like the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, comprehension of martial arts was nothing too difficult. On the other hand, it was the accumulation of origin power in which they had to make every step they took sturdy and solid, as it was impossible for them to build a castle on empty air. Thus, as the 2 of them increased their comprehension of cultivation in the midst of battles, accompanied with the use of spiritual fluid to increase the accumulation of their origin power, they improved very quickly, and at the rate they were going, they would be able to reach the peak of the spiritual infant tier in 2 years at most. This was something very scary. Even such monsters like the small Saber King and Lang Yatian had only seen hope of breaking through to the deity transformation tier when they were close to their 40s, so no matter how fast they would only have reached the peak of the spiritual infant tier after they were 30 years old. The Rain Emperor was older in the first place, so he couldn't be counted, but Mu Rongqing was only 25 years old. This meant that he would be able to reach the peak of the spiritual infant tier before he was 30. If he was lucky, it would not be impossible for him to break through to the deity transformation tier by the time he was 30 years old. One had to know that the small Saber King and Lang Yutian had obtained the full support of ancient great sects to be able to surpass them in cultivation level. This was naturally a tremendously shocking feat. There was nothing to be done. Ling Han was the alchemy emperor, and added with the fact that the Black Tower could speed up the growth of spiritual herbs, it would be strange if their progress was slow. How could such a godly treasure like the Black Tower be inferior to mere worldly existences like the ultimate Saber sect and the Heaven's Sword sect? The Rain Emperor and Murong Qing brought back two pieces of news. They were huge news that could stun the whole Middle State or even this whole world. About a month ago, the Thousand Corpse sect bought the whole Million Treasure City, the Rain Emperor said. Pooh! Ling Han instantly choked. They could do that. Neither the Spirit Treasures Pavilion nor the Alchemist Society lack wealth. How could they have possibly agreed to selling their base? He asked in confusion. What kind of price did the Thousand Corpse sect offer that an ultimatia-shattering void tier elite cultivator and two heaven-grade alchemists had no way of refusing? If they had not dreaded coming up against these three, the Thousand Corpse sect would not have lured them away the first time when they intended to attack the Million Treasure City by force and make it so that it would be too late for them to do anything afterwards. Precisely because they had not wanted to go into a head-on confrontation with these three had the Thousand Corpse sect compromised and bought the Million Treasure City instead. The Thousand Corpse sect definitely paid an astronomical price, Murong Qing said. To be able to move the rich and imposing Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Alchemist Society, the Thousand Corpse sect must have paid a great price. Furthermore, to move even an ultimate elite of the Shattering Void tier and two heaven-grade alchemists, I surmise that this price involved the secrets of becoming immortal, as well as divine pills, perhaps? Ling Han nodded. In these 10,000 years, aside from Jiang Yufeng, whom he suspected to have entered the realm of immortals, he had not heard of anyone else rumored to have shattered the void and become an immortal. Even Jiang Yufeng's case was mere deduction on Ling Han's part, as there were no legends he had left behind. Feng Piyun had said as well that shattering the void now was possibly very dangerous, so he dared not break through immediately. Instead, he chose to further increase his cultivation and wait until he had reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier before making any further moves. For an ancient great sect like the Thousand Corpse sect, their inheritance was definitely not inferior in any way to the likes of the Heaven's Sword sect. Thus, who knew? They might have got a hold of certain secrets regarding becoming an immortal, and it would be nothing strange if they possessed a few formulae for divine-grade alchemical pills. Whatever was the case, it was a fact that Million Treasure City had now fallen into the possession of the Thousand Corpse sect. However, since the Thousand Corpse sect has paid such an astronomical price, their motivisa must definitely be even bigger. Ling Han said slowly. Previously, he had already deduced that either there was a great number of Shattering Void tier elite corpses buried in the Million Treasure City, or there might be some ultimate treasure there, which would make the Thousand Corpse sect become even stronger than before. The 5 ancient great sects are very displeased with this matter, and have already decided to deploy troops to attack Million Treasure City. Their stand on this matter is extraordinarily firm, the Rain Emperor said. From this standpoint, the 5 ancient great sects are really hot-blooded. This is practically unlike them. Ling Han shook his head, confusion all over his face. It wasn't that there had never been unrest in history, but it was a rare case that the 5 ancient great sects would make a move. Only when the Thousand Corpse sect appeared would they become very proactive, as if they had some great enmity with the former. The 5 ancient great sects battling against the Thousand Corpse sect, this is indeed a big issue. If not handled properly, it may implicate and cause turmoil in the whole world, Ling Han said after some thought. He could not help but sigh. He was currently growing, and his greatest hope was for an environment in which he could cultivate quietly. He definitely did not want to witness a great war happen. The Thousand Corpse sect actually dared to appear in public in such a grand manner, I'm afraid that they must be very confident to do that, the Rain Emperor said. Ling Han nodded. With the Thousand Corpse sect making such a public comeback, it was obvious that they had made preparations for all sorts of scenarios. If they were to be easily destroyed by the 5 ancient great sects, that would be too much of a joke. What's the situation now? He asked. The 5 ancient great sects are currently gathering their troops, and have even issued a request for reinforcements to the whole world in order to destroy the Thousand Corpse sect together, the Rain Emperor said. However, it's very far from us, so the news took some time to get here. Therefore, it's uncertain whether they have begun the battle or are still preparing. Chapter 638, Reckoning. Chapter 638, Reckoning. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said with a smile, with our current ability, we would only be able to think about this kind of thing. No matter who wins or loses, it is not something we can interfere with. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing exuded a strong battle intent as they both looked impassioned. The Rain Emperor was a formidable character, whose dominating aura was the strongest, whereas Mu Rongqing had a sloppy temperament, being only interested in becoming the world's strongest. The 3 of them had varying characters and personalities, but they shared a common characteristic, and that was all 3 had a furious passion for martial arts. All 3 had steadfast determination and fearless resolution. If that had not been the case, they wouldn't have recognized one another as brothers in the first place. After another 30 years, it will be our turn to make big waves, they declared ruefully and passionately. They wanted to compete with great, shattering, void-tier elite cultivators after merely 30 years. If these words spread out, others would definitely laugh at them with such a ridiculous notion. But the 3 of them were filled with self-confidence. With their natural talent, as well as Ling Han's alchemical pills, they definitely had the chance to reach shattering void tier and pass judgment ONT the world. Ling Han calmed his emotions and asked, "There was another piece of news." This piece of news is a little interesting. The Rain Emperor paused. Not too long ago, a small city in the Middle State suddenly announced its establishment as the Purple Moon Empire, establishing their nation's leader, and created a system of officials for all its citizens to pay respect. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Sumyeon actually established their own nation. What were they playing at? Aside from the desolate north, the 4 regions and the Middle State did not have any concept of a nation. There were only the various ancient clans and sects dividing the territory amongst themselves, and each would have jurisdiction over their own territory. In comparison, there were no laws in this world, and the only fact publicly acknowledged was strength was power. The mutually agreed upon idea was that strength was the law. Comparing the 9 desolate areas with the outer world, in truth, establishing nations was not a bad idea. There would be laws that everyone had to adhere to, which would greatly decrease the amount of bloodshed. Of course, if those in charge were corrupted, then it would be the same whether it was an empire, a sect, or a clan. A sudden thought came to Ling Han. Why were there no empires in the Middle State and the 4 regions? One had to know that power of the nation was a good thing. In the past, the Rain Emperor only had 1 foot into the flower blossom tier, yet was capable of standing against someone who was actually in the flower blossom tier. Aside from the Rain Emperor himself being strong, the power of the nation was also a vital factor. Since power of the nation was so good, why did no other parties consider the idea? In this world, empire is a taboo, Mu Rongqing said. There is a firm law in our south region. Any party can freely fight over territory, but definitely must not establish their own empire. Otherwise, they would be destroyed by the entire south region. The Rain Emperor nodded and said, I've also searched through ancient records. The founding emperor of our country only thought of establishing a country after discovering a secret scroll from ancient times in the Devil's Sky mystery realm. And if it wasn't for the fact that the desolate north is really too small and too remote from the mainland, we would probably have long been destroyed. I wouldn't have thought of it if we weren't on the subject. Power of the nation is obviously something very good and beneficial to cultivation. Yet, why have there never appeared any empires in this world? Ling Han wore a curious expression. In his last life, there similarly had not been any empires. However, at that time his full focus was on alchemy, so he had taken no notice of this fact at all. However, in the ancient times, the real ancient era, there were indeed empires in the world, and furthermore, they were incredibly powerful, he said. The thunderclap ninth heaven, for example, had been obtained from the treasure trove of an ancient empire. Moreover, this was not the strongest mystical power there was, either. That was something from dozens of millennia ago. That ancient empire wanted to bring the whole world and ascend to the realm of immortals. But, obviously, they failed their mission. At the time, this ancient empire could be considered to have united the whole world, and was extremely powerful. Could it be that this Purple Moon Empire intends to follow the example? The Rain Emperor and Murong Qing exclaimed in surprise. Who is the nation's leader? Ling Han asked. His surname is Ma, and is named Ma Duobao. He calls himself the Purple Moon Divine Emperor. The Rain Emperor answered. Pooh! Ling Han once again accidentally spat out his saliva. Fuck Ma Duobao. He remembered that back in Million Treasure City, Ma Duobao had once earnestly invited him to join in the venture to split open the skies. He had not thought that, after a mere few months, this guy had really performed a great feat. Still, without the support of an extremely powerful party, how long would this Purple Moon Empire last? Hold on. That ancient empire seemed to have failed to split open the skies before their destruction, and Ma Duobao also mentioned he wanted to split open the skies and even established a nation. Could it be that only a nation could split open the skies? Ling Han felt his thoughts were slightly in a mess. In this life, whatever crazy thing could really happen. Ma Duobao was definitely not an idiot. On the other hand, this man was unfathomable. Ling Han could not see through him at all. Either he had some kind of secret technique, or his ability was at least at the late stage of the heaven tier. On one side, there was the 1,000 Corpse sect, which definitely would not be content with their place. They were definitely aiming for all life in this world, wanting to cause great suffering so that they could refine everyone into corpse soldiers. And on the other side, there was the Purple Moon Empire. Since they had established their own nation, then it would be natural to expand their territory. So it was inevitable that they would launch a worldwide expedition, and the might of that ancient empire would reappear. It seems like the world is about to experience a great upheaval. Ling Han sighed. Furthermore, the 5 great sects have also predicted that a great catastrophe akin to what happened 10,000 years ago would happen again. Really, all the excitement is happening at the same time, the Rain Emperor said. We can only work hard at our cultivation and increase our own power so as to gain the power to protect ourselves and speak, Murong Qing concluded. Ling Han and the Rain Emperor nodded. That Uncle Rabbit had listened from the side for a long time. He raised his little paw and said, Lord Rabbit has some knowledge about that so-called great catastrophe. Oh, speak quickly. Ling Han was instantly interested. Rabbit put on an act and said, where is Lord Rabbit's tea? Ah. It had wanted to act coy for a moment longer, but the result was crying out in pain when Hunyo bit him. Say it. Hunyo said in displeasure. This rabbit was really a little lowly. It obviously knew that Hunyo very much liked to bite it, yet still continued to repeatedly provoke Hunyo into biting it. It coughed, then said, There is a myth transmitted with Lord Rabbit's bloodline. Once every 10,000 years or so, there would be a great reckoning in the world. At that time, all life would be in terrible straits, and only a very, very few people would manage to survive. Reckoning. Ling Han was astonished. This was yet another theory. For someone like Lord Rabbit that has an ancestor living in the realm of immortals, we would be those who would be spared, and no one would dare touch a single hair on Lord Rabbit's head. But for those like you, it would be terrible. Rabbit said. Ling Han could not help but snort. This reckoning really bullies the weak, but fears the strong. Brat, this is life. Get over it. Rabbit him comforted, but no matter he looked at it, it seemed to be showing off. Reckoning? Why does there have to be reckoning? And who would be doing the reckoning? Ling Han asked. Rabbit pointed at the skies and said, As for why, Lord Rabbit does not know either. The sky? The sky meant the realm of immortals. The Tao of this world should not be wanting to bring ruin to all life. And from the memory crystal that Zi Shuexian had left behind, someone who wanted to destroy all life in this world, had indeed come from the realm of immortals. Ling Han still came back to that old problem if the realm of immortals really wanted to do a reckoning. With merely the power of the 5 ancient great sects, how could they possibly stop them? There had to be another reason for it, and the answer was possibly hidden inside the clear Harmony Palace Hall. Ling Han could not help but want even more urgently to obtain an ancient map. Ling Han, come out to your death. Chapter 639. The 3 brothers join forces. Chapter 639. The 3 brothers join forces. Ling Han, come out and die, a cold voice rang out. It was as if a blade had sliced through, and leaves from around them dropped, torn into pieces. Quite a number of people threw up blood, and they were even more shocked. Who was this man that would be so terrifying merely his voice alone could cause them to collapse? 3rd brother, your enemy? Mu Rongqing asked. He looked very spirited. Wait for me to take him down. Ling Han smiled and said, 2nd brother, I fear you are no match for him. Oh, who is that man? Even the Rain Emperor had become curious, and looked to be filled with battle intent. Small Saber King. Wang, a figure appeared. He had a tall, slender build, and saber intent wound all over his body, transforming into uncountable sabers of various shapes and sizes. There were long and short sabers, gold and silver sabers, and there were closely woven patterns on every blade, exuding a powerful aura. Everyone felt terror. There were some who were forced to their knees, which overwhelmed them with shock. One had to know that all those who could come to this place were geniuses, and no matter what, had at least formed one flash of qi, having the potential to become a ruler within martial arts. But even so, they could not defy this man's aura, which showed how utterly terrifying this person was. A ruler amongst rulers. In this place, many geniuses had gathered, and as close to a month had passed, there were naturally even more present. But due to the oppressive aura of Small Saber King, 12,000 people could not even release even the slightest sound, as they were all subdued by a single person. This was the bearing that a ruler amongst rulers should have. Merely standing there would force innumerable geniuses to bow their heads in submission. Ling Han stepped out, and the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing stood on either side of him, showing clearly their attitude that they would advance or retreat with him. Small Saber King, someone at the peak of the spiritual infant tier. Even if the 3 of them joined forces, no one would say anything. The difference in cultivation level was there, after all. Putting aside the idea of 3 people attacking together, even if 10 people attacked together, they would not be blamed either. No way, this brat is enemies with Small Saber King too. TSK, just some time ago, he did that to Fairy Ian and offended the Blue Thunder sect. And now he's being hunted down by Small Saber King of the Absolute Saber sect. Out of the 5 ancient great sects, he's actually offended 2 of them. Why does Small Saber King want to kill this brat? Could it be that Small Saber King likes Fairy Ian? No way. I heard that Fairy Ian is in love with Lang Yutian. TSK, a love triangle, what a mess. No. Now that this brat is added into the bunch, it's obviously a love rectangle. The spectators mumbled amongst themselves. Not only women, but in fact men also tended to be quite gossipy, especially someone like Li Fengyu, who would want nothing more than to yell out such spicy gossip. Small Saber King stood proudly in midair. He had been on the hunt for Ling Han all this time, yet lost his tail, and it was only when he heard that Ling Han caused a great commotion at Wang Yun's banquet some time ago that he rushed all the way here. As his eyes swept over Ling Han and his two sworn brothers, condescension curled the corners of his lips up as he said, "With the power of just the three of you, you intend to stop me? How would we know if we don't try?" Ling Han said heroically. These two sworn brothers of his were similarly rulers in martial arts, especially the Rain Emperor. As the saying went, a great talent matured slowly, but on the other hand, good preparation was the key to success, so he had terrifying battle prowess. Snort, foolish! Small Saber King was no longer interested in speaking, and directly drew out his saber in a slash. A terrifying saber chi rolled past, as if it was a blade that would startle even the sky, and slid down from the skies. Pseudo-ray! Ling Han gave a loud shout, and directly drew out the demon birth, sword to parry. Against a powerful foe like Small Saber King, it was impossible for him to hold back in the slightest. If he did, that would be joking around with his own life. With a ding, the treasured sword clashed with Saber-ray, but Ling Han was forced into a sliding retreat. His feet were like two spades that dug out deep grooves in the incredibly hard mountain rocks. "Break!" Ling Han shouted loudly, and as his long sword waved down in a slash, the Saber-ray was cut in half and slashed past either side of him. In the meantime, the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had already charged out. Both of them used fist techniques, and with martial intent and origin power wrapping around their fists, they possessed very terrifying destructive power behind their blows, which enabled them to take on a sharp blade with their bare fists. Hang, two minor characters that had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, actually want to stand against me? Small Saber King sneered, and pulled out his saber in a slash, his aura majestic. The Rain Emperor roared in rage, and as he brandished his fists, Fist Ray rushed forth, extremely ferocious. Small Saber King finally exclaimed in surprise. Raven, if it was the condensation of 10 flashes of chi, it surpassed 30 separate flashes of chi. This was a natural suppression. Mu Rongqing showed his might as well. Although he had not condensed a ray, in terms of chi he had formed a total of 29 flashes, so his battle prowess was similarly not to be underestimated. On the ground, Ling Han charged up with his sword as well. Ha ha ha! 3 minor characters, not worth mentioning. Small Saber King immediately regained his cool. Though the Rain Emperor had condensed a ray, he had broken through when he had merely formed 10 flashes of chi, so his power was limited. Meanwhile, he was at an absolute advantage in cultivation level as he had half a foot into the deity transformation tier, whereas his battle prowess had long since spiked up to this level. He had at least 5 stars of the deity transformation tier, so he was spine-chillingly powerful. With a slash of his saber, Ling Han and his brothers, who dared not take it head-on, could only retreat. Ha 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 ha! Small Saber King laughed loudly and slashed wildly at Ling Han. This man had killed his father, which filled him with deep-seated hatred. Furthermore, there was also a little girl that had obtained his thunderclap 9th heaven mystical power, whom he definitely had to kill as well. He would directly pluck out her soul from her body. Ling Han gave a humph, and lightning flickered over his body. In an instant, he had a parried by the side of the Small Saber King, and swiped his sword forth in a slash. What? Small Saber King exclaimed in shock. It was not because Ling Han moved too fast, but rather because there was a flicker of lightning with his movement. That obviously was the thunderclap, 9th heaven. How could that be? A mystical power could only be learnt by one person. So why would Hunyo be followed by Ling Han? 2 people who had both learnt thunderclap, 9th heaven. If he knew that not only Ling Han and Hunyo, but also Hellion Sun Shui had learnt the thunderclap 9th heaven, who knew what kind of expression he would have? He would probably be so overcome with shock that he would not be able to accept such a fact. How could you have possibly learnt the thunderclap, ninth heaven? Small Saber King exclaimed in a severe tone. It was obvious that Hunyo was still on the ground, and it was impossible that she was capable of astral projection. So where had Ling Han learnt this mystical power? None of your business. Ling Han brandished his sword in a quick slash. 29 flashes of chi condensed into pseudo-ray, which whizzed towards Small Saber King. This was a pseudo-ray that had been shot out by a level 10 spirit tool, so its power was almost no weaker than a real ray's. Even Small Saber King dared not be too careless, and had to wield his saber to parry. Otherwise, if he was hit by the sword ray, even he would be deeply injured. The eyes of the Small Saber King iced over, and he said with a sneer, "All right, then I only have to kill you alone." Though he did not take Hunyo seriously, the speed of the little girl's movements shocked even him, and he absolutely could not guarantee that he would be able to take her down successfully. He pushed out with his left hand and swept it towards the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, whereas his right hand wielded his saber to slash towards Ling Han. Every single strike was merciless. He only wanted to take Ling Han's life. Ling Han and his brothers joined forces to attack, but Small Saber King was really too strong. His battle prowess that was on the level of the deity transformation tier allowed him to be at an absolute advantage, and every blow he struck caused Ling Han and his brothers to be battered and exhausted. Unless Ling Han used the exterminating Dragon Star arrow to impede him, at this moment, the three of them were already heading for a crushing defeat. Ling Han swallowed a pill. It was the 5 revolutions black jade pill. He had concocted a total of 3 pills. In the previous battle against Xianyuan Ziguang, he had already taken one, and the pill he was taking now was the second one. As the alchemical pill entered his stomach, its effects were immediately seen, and he gained an upgrade of a total 9 stars to his battle prowess. Initially, his battle prowess had reached 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier, or perhaps even more than that, and now, with a power upgrade of 9 stars of battle prowess, he had immediately soared up to the level of the deity transformation tier. Chapter 640, Yao Hui Yu comes to aid. Chapter 640, Yao Hui Yu comes to aid. This was really inconceivable. He was merely in the flower blossom tier, yet already possessed the battle prowess of the deity transformation tier. Although that was only equivalent to having 1 star of the deity transformation tier. Still, the effects of the alchemical pill were rapidly weakening. Previously, when Ling Han had taken the first 5 revolution black jade pill, he had gained a power upgrade of 10 battle stars, and though his power upgrade had only decreased by a single star now, it was still indeed on the decline. There was nothing that could be done about it. All alchemical pills would have an immunity level, and the higher grade the alchemical pill, the higher the immunity level would be. Now he could still increase his battle prowess by 9 stars, and next time it would drop down to 8 stars, followed by 7 stars, 6 stars, 5 stars, and finally there would be no effects at all. Just like when one ate 1,000-year ginseng to extend one's lifespan, the first stalk could add another 30 years of life. But the effects of the second one would be halved, and the third one would be once again halved. With a long whistle, Ling Han brandished his sword in a slash. He had finally gotten the qualification to stand against Small Saber King. Still, there was still quite a big gap between the two of them. 5 stars against 1 star. That was an absolute domination. Thankfully, there was still the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing impeding from the side, although their respective battle prowess was far from the deity transformation tier. They were still geniuses after all. One had already formed Ray, whereas the other had formed 29 flashes of Qi, and not even Small Saber King dared take on their attacks carelessly. Ling Han became the main attacker, and naturally was too busy to retreat to a farther distance so that he could pose a threat to the Small Saber King. The might of archery could only be displayed with adequate distance, and in a close-up battle, there was practically no space for archery to be used. However, the flash of lightning was wrapped all over his entire body. This was a great mystical power from the ancient era. The power of lightning was extremely terrifying, and after being attacked, not only would one experience a numbness in limbs, there would even be a stagnation in origin power, which greatly decreased Small Saber King's battle prowess. This caused Small Saber King to be enraged and have even more thoughts about the thunderclap, ninth heaven. If he could learn this mystical power, it would be enough to raise his battle prowess by another 5 stars. No, 10. Just think about it. He was only at the peak of the spiritual infant tier, yet would be capable of killing an elite cultivator in the 9th layer of the deity transformation tier. How shocking would that be? His killing intent blazed, and he slashed forth with his saber, endlessly striking blows at Ling Han. Ling Han used the demon fairy steps. He was the main attacker, but was not so stupid that he would take on Small Saber King on directly with his strength. There was still quite a large gap between the two of them, and he completely did not have the qualification to take on the latter in a face-to-face confrontation. Small Saber King displayed a bearing of invincibility. Alone, he was battling against 3 super geniuses, and not only was he not on the losing side, he actually completely gained the upper hand. He could only be described with the word terrifying. All around them, the dozen thousands of people all watched in astonishment. They were shocked by how powerful these 4 people were. Small Saber King was strong, but Ling Han and his brothers were not weak either. After all, there was a gap in cultivation level. Otherwise, if all of them were fighting with the same cultivation level, it really would be undecided who would win or lose. Xiao. But it was at this moment that another figure appeared and charged at them with a sword in hand. Who was this again? A slash swept out, and 29 flashes of sword chi danced. Everyone was dumbfounded. What was wrong with this world? Forming 10 flashes of chi would qualify one to condense his chi to form Ray and call himself a ruler amongst rulers, and there were very few that managed to form 11 or 12 flashes of chi. But now, people that had formed 29 flashes of chi appeared in quick succession, and it seemed like they were very commonplace nowadays. This attack was aimed at Small Saber King. Yao Huiyu! Small Saber King roared furiously. He struck out with his saber at the sword chi, and pung, the sword chi was instantly shattered, but he was also now too busy to attack Ling Han. The number 2 sword of the world, Yao Huiyu. Who would have thought that this person that had suddenly made a move would actually be Yao Huiyu? Even Ling Han was slightly stunned. There did not seem to be much friendly relations between himself and Yao Huiyu, so why did the latter act like he was a very close friend of his now? This man is my rival, and can only be killed with my hand. Yao Huiyu stood with sword in hand. As the mountain breeze blew, the corner of his robes floated, and he looked like a deity descended. The Small Saber King was enraged. This was his fuck reason? He looked at Yao Huiyu darkly and said, "You are still unskilled. Even if there were 10 of you, you would be no match for me." Yet Yao Huiyu did not take his words to heart at all, and said, "You have only cultivated a few more years than I. If we battled on the same cultivation level, or at the same age, it would be a piece of cake for me to defeat you. Small Saber King, I have never taken you seriously. The greatest genius of the Absolute Saber sect is Su Xiuran, and only he is qualified to become my rival." The Small Saber King could not help but look angry. This was undisguised looking down on him. His saber shook, and he said, "Yao Huiyu, do you want to die? Do you have that ability to kill me?" Yao Huiyu stepped forward with a sword in hand, and joined forces with Ling Han against Small Saber King. He, too, had advanced into the spiritual infant tier, but was only at the 3rd layer of the spiritual infant tier. Still, his battle prowess was terrifyingly high and extremely shocking. The treasured sword he wielded was also a high-level spirit tool, and as he slashed out with 10,000 techniques, returned to one, which had shocking destructive power, even Small Saber King had to face him with utmost seriousness. Naturally, Yao Huiyu had also condensed pseudo-ray. He had not yet breached the huge barrier that was 30 flashes of qi, and thus did not choose to form point. Otherwise, if he chose to use 10,000 techniques returned to one at that time, this destructive power would be even more astonishing. Ling Han sighed internally. He, too, knew the mysterious 3,000 technique. Unfortunately, after he came to the middle state, he did not dare to use it much anymore. Only when it was a matter of life or death would he actually use it. However, he was now the main attacker and blocked Small Saber King's direct attacks, and Yao Huiyu, the Rain Emperor, and Mu Rongqing were able to calmly unleash their full battle prowess, which naturally posed a great threat to Small Saber King. Merely looking at the circumstances, Ling Han and the others were naturally still in a crisis, just as if they were walking on a tight rope. However, Small Saber King did not appear to have his victory assured, either, because he only needed to be slightly careless, and it was possible that lose the whole game and be destroyed by Yao Huiyu and the other two. Especially Yao Huiyu, the might of 10,000 techniques returned to one was really too powerful. Damn it! Small Saber King roared in rage, yet abruptly turned around and left. With these 4 great prodigies joining forces, even if he was at an absolute advantage in terms of cultivation level, he could do nothing else to them. It would be meaningless to continue the battle. He could meet his gains or losses bravely, and so left at once. He would not believe that there would always be so many geniuses following by Ling Han's side. Damn it, he had not brought the diamond puppet with him. If not, with the aid of a puppet on the level of the deity transformation tier, it would be a piece of cake to totally annihilate these 4 men. Ling Han put away his sword, then looked at Yao Huiyu and said with a smile, "Yao Huiyu, I really had not thought that you would step out." I was not helping you. I merely did not like how Small Saber King was taking unfair advantage with his superior strength. Furthermore, I should be the one to end your life, and this was something that I had said long ago. Yao Huiyu said coldly, "Ha ha ha ha, I am much obliged." Ling Han clapped a hand on Yao Huiyu's shoulder and felt that this guy was actually quite interesting. "Don't act so familiar with me. I am not your friend." Yao Huiyu declared coldly, "It's fine even if we're not friends. Come, let us drink some wine," Ling Han said, smiling, and forcefully pulled Yao Huiyu down to sit. Xian air. Yao Huiyu did not refuse too firmly. He dropped onto the ground and immediately looked towards Zhu Xianair. Yet when he saw her face, he could not help but look extremely astonished. Who was this woman? Zhu Xianair merely smiled reservedly and maintained an appropriate distance. Yao Huiyu was stunned. Judging by her figure, this was definitely Zhu Xianair. Also, when he called her name, she had responded. This was really Zhu Xianair. This was definitely not his Zhu Xianair. Chapter 641. Heaven Cloud, Purple Thunder. Chapter 641. Heaven Cloud, Purple Thunder. Yao Huiyu felt unbearably pained. His Zhu Xianair actually looked like this. In the north region, merely her figure and the personality she revealed were sufficient to entrance him. He would willingly fall to his knees for her, but now, after seeing her real appearance, it was as if someone had sliced a knife into his heart. This discrepancy was really too big, and just like that, his first love came to nothing. Ling Han laughed loudly and slung an arm around Yao Huiyu's shoulders as he said, "Small Yao, even if we fight to death tomorrow, that is something that would only happen tomorrow. Thanks for today. Come, let us drink some wine. No one's going home sober." For someone with excellent self-discipline like Yao Huiyu, who was naturally unwilling to get himself drunk, but now the only thing he wanted was to drink himself to forget all his troubles. Without a word, he sat down and did not refuse any who offered him a drink. He gulped down one cup after another, and very quickly, with a paw, he collapsed and began snoring away. "What poor capacity for liquor!" the Rain Emperor commented with a laugh. Meanwhile, Ling Han said in a meaningful tone, "When one drinks wine with a troubled mind, it is easier to get drunk." When Yao Huiyu awoke the next day, he discovered that he was lying alone on a rock. The moment he got to his feet, he felt a throbbing headache. The effects of a hangover were kicking in. He gripped his head and swore that he definitely would not get himself drunk in future. He looked up at the skies and could not help but show a self-mocking smile. Previously, he kept himself at Zhu Xian'er's beck and call and tried his best to gain her favor. But had he really fallen in love with her? She was a woman whose face he had never even seen before. So how could it be possible that he would develop true feelings for her? It was simply that he had deceived himself with his own feelings and imagined her to be an extreme beauty, which was why he admired her so completely, and now his dream had shattered. From now onwards, he could place his full focus and attention on martial arts. Yao Huiyu's thoughts cleared, and instantly, an expression of great happiness appeared on his face because he had touched the barrier to the 30th flash of sword qi. Indeed, a great emotional upheaval had a great influence on grasping qi. Previously, no matter how hard he cultivated, he could not get the gist of it. "I want to become the #1 person in the young generation," he declared passionately, completely forgetting his disappointment in romance. The greatest genius naturally had unsurpassed self-discipline. Ling Han waited another 5 days. Kenyi was still awaiting the arrival of that disciple of Heaven's Sword sect when another piece of news reached the man. Earthquake had happened at the great brilliant mountains, and it seemed like a great treasure had appeared. Flashes of lightning shot skywards and illuminated the skies. For this reason, a great many people had already departed to make their way towards Great Brilliant Mountains. It was located in the Flying Blossom County anyways, and it would only be a matter of 1 to 2 days to get there. Waiting for Kenyi, Ling Han could only stay behind calmly. Furthermore, flashes of lightning did not mean that an ultimate treasure had really appeared. Previously, when he had guided lightning into his body to cultivate the thunderclap 9th heaven, hadn't he also caused lightning to flash for a whole night and day? Who knew? This might be caused by a person who cultivated a thunder-type technique and was currently taking a very important step in his cultivation. Ling Han waited patiently, but the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had already set out. They said that if there really was some treasure with lightning traits, they would definitely bring it back for Ling Han so that he could truly form a body of lightning. This was his two brothers' sincerity. It would not be appropriate for Ling Han to refuse, so he could only watch as they left. However, Ling Han did indeed very much want to form a body of lightning. Currently, he could only speed up his movement with the aid of lightning. But if he could actually become lightning, his speed could still increase another level and be on par with Hunyou's. Great Brilliant Mountains. Aren't they one of the mountain ranges suspected to be boundless mountains? Zhu Xian'er asked Ling Han after she found out. Ling Han nodded and said, "It can't be such a coincidence that the Clear Harmony Palace Hall really is there." It was not impossible because Zi Shuexian cultivated power of lightning, and there were flashes of lightning soaring skywards at the Great Brilliant Mountains, which was really too much of a coincidence. We'll wait 1 more day, and if there is still no news from Kenyi, we'll set out. Ling Han decided to go and take a look. However, when Kenyi came over that night, he brought back a piece of bad news. That true disciple of the Heaven's Sword sect was actually unable to bring back an ancient map. He said that his sect watched over it extremely closely and treated it like it was a top-grade cultivation or martial arts technique, so there was no way they would allow it to be seen by outsiders. Not just outsiders were unable to see it. Even if their own disciples wanted to study the ancient map, they had to ascend to a certain level, such as the Heaven Tier, or be a prodigious, genius disciple like Yao Huiyu. But Ling Han could not help but curse. It was just a map. Was there a need to treasure it to this extent? The Heaven's Sword sect feared that they would find out something? Was it the secret that Zi Shuexian had left behind? It should not be possible. How would they know that she had left behind last words? Moreover, so many years have passed, and it could be that the place was eternally buried underground, or had been destroyed completely. These 5 great sects were acting abnormally. Ling Han hesitated no longer. Together with Zhu Xianer and Hunyao, he rushed towards the great, brilliant mountains. Naturally, Rabbit followed them as well. All day, it would chew on 1,000-year ginseng like it was a carrot, and boast shamelessly that this was only interest. Only when Ling Han paid him 2 stalks of dragon's blood overlord ginseng would he no longer have to pay interest. The consequence of having such a bad mouth was naturally being bitten by Hunyao, which caused it to yowl in pain. Yet it still made no change in its behavior, just asking to be bitten. Talking and laughing, having fun and bickering all the way there, they soon arrived at the great, brilliant mountains. The Flying Blossom County was not the largest county in the Middle State, but was definitely the county that had the most mountain ranges. This great, brilliant mountains were also a huge mountain range, extending over several hundred miles, shocking in its great size. This place was filled with a primitive air. There were terrifying demonic beasts rampaging here. Common people dared not travel too deep into the mountains, as the slightest bit of carelessness could cause them to lose their lives. Ling Han glanced over. The trees here all grew like they were precious swords, and the average height of the trees here was 300 m and above. They grew straight and upright. Branches were rarely seen, and the sight of them made for an image of austerity and harshness. And in the east of the mountain range, there was indeed a flash of lightning shooting skywards, rushing forth, prancing and sweeping over the whole mountain peaks. Let's go and take a look. Ling Han and the others flew towards that area. Now that Zhu Xianer had broken through to the flower blossom tier, the power of their team could be considered quite strong. Very soon, they arrived at the foot of the mountains. They could see occasional flashes of lightning rush out halfway up the mountains. This was the origin of the flashes of lightning. It had affected the whole mountain, so no one dared approach. An expression of utter astonishment appeared on Ling Han's face, and in spite of himself, he exclaimed, "Heaven cloud, purple thunder!" A brat like you actually knows about the heaven cloud, purple thunder? Rabbit asked in surprise, looking very curious. This is one of the 10 great ultimate thunders of ancient times. What 10 great ultimate thunders? Zhu Xianer asked curiously. Rabbit was the type to get hyped up in front of an audience. With a willing listener, it instantly got the urge to show off, yet had not predicted that he would be the target of a ferocious glare from Hunyao. In the end, it rubbed the many wounds that had yet to recover on its backside, and dared not seek trouble. Thus it said, "There are spirits in the world. Even this mountain and water, this stone and fire, could possibly grow their own consciousness and become a unique kind of life form." Oh, so aren't they fire spirits, stone spirits, and water spirits then? Zhu Xianer came to a realization. Then she clapped her hands abruptly and exclaimed, "Could it be that there is a thunder spirit here?" Ling Han nodded and said that should be the case. Furthermore, it is an impressive guy too. Chapter 642. Entering the Zone of Thunder. Chapter 642. Entering the Zone of Thunder. How impressive? Zhu Xianer asked. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said seriously, "There are differences in strength for even spirits developed by the world. To rank thunder spirits in terms of power, Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder could be ranked amongst the top 10, so it's very powerful. Then how would the Big Rock Man and Strange Fire be ranked?" Zhu Xianer was curious. Only when there was something to compare against would there be a clearer understanding. Ling Han made a rough comparison and said Small Rock at most can be ranked in the top 100, and Strange Fire couldn't even be counted in the top 100 before, but after being refined, it should be able to rank in the top 100. Only now did Zhu Xianer's expression change. Merely those being ranked in the top 100 had such great power. So how powerful would a spirit ranked in the top 10 be? Just like the prodigy role of the North region. At that time, being in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier would qualify one to be ranked in the top 100. But what kind of existence would the top 10 be? The spiritual pedestal tier. There was no small gap between the two. Looking at it this way, this heaven cloud, purple thunder would be very terrifying. Ling Han looked closely and said, "The uncontrolled appearance of lightning is proof that the thunder cloud is about to appear. If it really became something that possesses intelligence, I fear no one would be able to obtain it." Putting aside how terrifying the battle prowess this thunder spirit would have, merely in terms of speed, how many people could catch up to it? Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier, but his speed was enough to be on par with the deity transformation tier. A thunder spirit had a body purely made out of thunder, so how fast could it be? Perhaps only if a shattering void tier ultimate elite cultivator moved would it be caught. Hold on. Ling Han paused. Those years ago, the Zishuesian was definitely in the shattering void tier. So could this thunder spirit actually have been caught by her? It had been suppressed here all this while, and after these 10,000 years had passed, the strength of its fetters had weakened, and coupled with the environmental changes incited by the earthquake, the restrictions weakened further. Finally, the thunder spirit managed to escape and began the last step of its metamorphosis. This place, could it really be the boundless mountains from years ago? Ling Han was moved. He was yet unable to transform into lightning, but if he could refine the heaven cloud, purple thunder, he would definitely be able to reach major achievement in his cultivation of the thunderclap 9th heaven no matter what. He would at least reach minor achievement level, and he would have truly learned it and not be half-assed like it was now. He was so excited that even his whole body was trembling. By that time, how terrifying would his battle prowess be? By then, he'd probably completely be able to battle an enemy on a whole cultivation tier higher than himself. He, a flower blossom tier cultivator, could fight on equal footing with an opponent in the deity transformation tier. That really sounded like something out of a myth. I am only one step away from Body of Diamond and also one step away from 30 flashes of chi. If I really could obtain this heaven cloud, purple thunder, and refine it, who knows, I might be able to reach Body of Diamond and form 30 flashes of chi. At that time, I would be able to condense a ray, birth a spiritual infant, and thunder and lightning would temper my physical body all in one go. Thus, once I break through to spiritual infant tier, I should be able to battle on equal footing against the strongest deity transformation tier cultivators. This was really inconceivable. If one could battle an opponent 5 battle stars stronger than himself, he would be considered a super genius, and those that could battle with a power gap of 10 stars would be nature-defying ultra geniuses, the likes of the Sword Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. But if Ling Han released his full power, he would be able to fight someone 20 stars stronger than himself. Of course, this took into account the 3 mystical powers, the Demon Birth Sword, the mysterious 3000 technique, and the indestructible Heaven Scroll. If he excluded any of these trump cards, that would mean that his battle prowess would drop a few stars. However, if he really managed to fuse with this strange thunder, he could possess more than 20 stars of battle prowess with merely the 3 mystical powers and fighting barehanded. And that would be enough to suppress the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, that fierce woman. Ling Han mumbled. No matter what, he was a chauvinistic male, so he would definitely not resign himself to being suppressed by the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Still, I don't know what level this fierce woman currently is. Even if she is the lowest level immortal, I'm afraid that she could still suppress me with a single finger. AI, the path to suppressing the fierce woman is long, and I still have to search everywhere for a means. Ling Han was absent-minded for a while, then snapped his fingers and said, "Xian-Er, you should stay here." Zhu Xian-Er understood and nodded. She pretended to want to say something quiet to Ling Han and pulled him into the forest. When Ling Han extended his divine sense to take her into the Black Tower, she planted a kiss on Ling Han's cheek first before entering into the Black Tower. This girl. Ling Han shook his head. He had occasionally spoken of the heavenly phoenix divine maiden to Zhu Xian'er, and most likely his momentary absent-mindedness previously had been accurately interpreted by the latter that he had been missing the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Zhu Xian'er was clever in how she was obviously jealous, yet treated Ling Han even more tenderly than before, so Ling Han too would remember her closely in his heart. Women truly are transformed from demons. At any place or time, they desire to steal your heart, Ling Han mused as he walked out of the forest. Hunyo placed her hands at her hips and declared with utmost seriousness, "Nyo not transformed from demon." Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly. Then he turned to look at Rabbit and said, "Hoodlum Rabbit, in front of us. The heaven cloud, purple thunder, is about to appear, and the power of lightning is incredibly dangerous. Do you still intend to follow? If you die, I can only plant the 2 stalks of dragon's blood overlord ginseng in front of your grave next year. Go away. Lord Rabbit is going to have a life as long as 100 years, and definitely is no short-lived rabbit." Rabbit flexed its tiny paws. "Haven't you already lived a few 100 years?" Hunyo said, curiously, "That's a very long life." Rabbit was dejected and replied, "Lord Rabbit misspoke. Can't I live as long as 10,000 years? Then take responsibility for your own life, and it's your own responsibility whatever the consequences," Ling Han said, smiling. He and Hunyo had already learnt the thunderclap, 9th heaven, and so had a close affinity with power of lightning. Compared to any other, they were better able to withstand the power of lightning. Furthermore, worst come to worst, didn't he still have the Black Tower as a backup plan? Rabbit was disdainful. Didn't they know that the characteristic trait of rabbits was that they could flee very fast? In flight, if Lord Rabbit admitted to be second place, what person would dare to claim to be first? The 2 people and 1 rabbit advanced. The power of lightning had enshrouded the whole peak. The purple-colored lightning was incredibly terrifying. It would scatter everywhere, and upon striking the trees or the mountain rocks, without an exception, they were all reduced to ash. Ling Han stretched out a finger, and Z absorbed the power of lightning that had overflowed. The 5 elements, mixed chaos lotus moved, and its stalk shone, guiding the power of lightning to traverse throughout Ling Han's body, allowing his physique to take 1 step closer to transforming into a body of lightning. This power of lightning was insignificant, so it was naturally extremely slow to transform it, but Ling Han did not mind in the slightest. At most, this could only be considered an appetizer, whereas the main course was the heaven cloud, purple thunder. As long as it had not completely transformed into a thunder spirit, it could be devoured. But if it succeeded to transform into a spirit, he had best flee. Hunyo was even more of a monster than Ling Han. She already had a body of lightning, and the power of lightning actually scrambled to enter into her body, which caused her to giggle uncontrollably as if she was being tickled. Really, different people had different lives. He had obviously also cultivated the thunderclap, 9th heaven, so why was there such a tremendous gap between the 2 of them? Ling Han sighed and was very envious of Hunyo. Don't be envious. This girl's ancestor is definitely a supreme elite from the realm of immortals. Even Lord Rabbit has to admit defeat in front of her bloodline inheritance and astonishing powers, Rabbit said from the side. Ling Han gave in, "Oh," and said, "You think that Hunyo's ancestor is some supreme elite from the realm of immortals. What else could be the case? Just tell Lord Rabbit. How else could a kid of 7 or 8 reach the flower blossom tier?" Rabbit said in a tone of certainty. Ling Han picked Rabbit up and said, "It seems that you have much of an understanding about the realm of immortals. So, tell me, how many different levels are immortals divided into?" Chapter 643, a dog that blocks the way. Chapter 643. A dog that blocks the way. Rabbit rolled its eyes at Ling Han and said, "You think your Lord Rabbit is an immortal? How would I know when I've never been to the realm of immortals? Then how do you know that Hunyuo's ancestor is a supreme elite from the realm of immortals?" Ling Han interrogated. "Che, how could she possibly be such a monster if her ancestor was not a supreme elite?" Rabbit humphed. Ling Han shook his head and thought that it was not Hunyuo's ancestor that was awesome, but she. The spirit base in her dantian was too terrifying. At least until now, Ling Han had not felt a stronger pressure than that from anyone else. Not in his last life, nor in this one. Not even those at the apex of humanity, like Feng Piyun and that giant silver spider that were in Shattering Void tier, could compare to a mere glance form, that maiden. The more time passed, and the higher his cultivation level advanced, Ling Han grew increasingly wary towards that human-shaped spirit base, and felt that it was increasingly inconceivable to him. Ling Han looked at how happy Hunyuo was, and there was only one wish inside his heart, that Hunyuo could always be so unfettered and carefree. As they advanced towards the mid-mountain area, the power of lightning became stronger and stronger, and Rabbit was forced to circulate origin power as defense. Though it was a demonic beast that had a strong physique, it would not be able to withstand the continued barrage of lightning. Without considering anything else, even if it was merely his snow-white rabbit's hide being charred, it'd rather it did not happen. Ling Han and Hunyuo, on the other hand, advanced smoothly. Though the power of lightning here was powerful, it was not berserk, so they could absorb it as easily as if it was thunder-aligned spiritual qi. The only difference was that it was denser, as it could take actual form and appear. Naturally, they were not the first group of people to come here. There was a great number of people already in the process of ascending the mountain. They had all stretched out their origin power to shield themselves, and every step they took was difficult. No one dared to soar in the skies. The lightning in the skies was too chaotic, appearing as if it was the heavens' wrath. Perhaps only deity transformation tier cultivators would dare force their way through. Otherwise, everyone else would simply have to obediently walk on the ground. Those walking ahead moved slower and slower. After all, there were not many that had a thunder-aligned spirit base, so they had to use their own origin power to shield themselves. Thus, they expended considerable amounts of origin power, and it was also a harsh burden on their stamina. For those that did not cultivate body techniques, they could only take a rest every few steps. Ling Han very soon stopped walking. That was because a narrow and winding road actually appeared in front of them, but there was a person that had actually sat himself down in the middle of the path to rest. If one wanted to continue the journey by passing over his head, it would be inevitable that he would be attacked by the lightning, which was an extremely dangerous thing. "Hey, please either take a few steps ahead or take a few steps back. Don't block this path that everybody has to pass through," Ling Han said. That was a man in his 30s. He was a high-level spiritual infant tier cultivator and could even possibly have reached the peak. Though his blood and vitality was strong, he was not as young as he looked. After all, once a cultivator broke through to the flower blossom tier, his aging would be slowed. Spiritual infant tier cultivators possessed a 500-year-long lifespan. Only those whose real age was below 200 years old would appear no different than someone in their 30s. That man swept a sideways look at Ling Han and Hunyuo, and could not help but throw a look of despise at them. He said in disdain, "A mere junior in the flower blossom tier dares to ask me to make way. Tisk, TSK, TSK, you're going to be in big trouble. Lord Rabbit guarantees it with my integrity." Rabbit immediately took delight in the man's upcoming misfortune. Demonic beast. That man gasped in shock. This rabbit actually could speak a human language. "Make way." Ling Han's expression had also turned cold. That man no longer bothered about a rabbit knowing how to speak in a human language, and turned back to Ling Han. he said with a sneer. "You actually dare to speak to me in this way. Are you tired of living?" "Lord Rabbit thinks that you're the one who's tired of living." Rabbit always had to interrupt. Ling Han said calmly, as the saying goes, a good dog does not block the way. "So, I had best kick away a naughty dog like you." "How dare you?" That man erupted into a towering rage, and actually made the first move. He stretched open his hand, and a black-colored whip flew out, twining towards Ling Han's head. An expression of cruelty appeared on his face. As long as it was entwined in his whip, with the terrifying attack of his origin power, he would be able to instantly pluck Ling Han's head from his shoulders. A cold light flashed in Ling Han's eyes too. Putting aside the fact that this man blocked the way, not allowing others to pass, he was really vicious with how he aimed to kill from his first move alone. There was naturally no need to be merciful towards such a man. Ling Han moved as well. Lightning encircled his hand, popping and crackling, and he took hold of the whip firmly. Z! The power of lightning instantly passed through the whip to its wielder. "Ah!" that man exclaimed. When the power of lightning was transmitted over, his whole right arm was numbed by the electricity. Furthermore, he had lost all feeling in his fingers, so he could not help but loosen his hand, and the whip dropped from it. He hurriedly stretched out his left hand to once again take hold of his whip. It was created from entwining flying cloud gold silk around blackwood cane, and was extremely valuable. But, xiao! The whip twisted around like it was a snake, and shot towards Ling Han quickly. Soon it had fallen into his hand. "Give it back," the man called out. Ling Han rolled his eyes and asked, "Is there something wrong with your head?" "Brett, are you planning to seek your own death?" that man asked darkly. "You speak as if you had not meant to kill me just now, and was merely playing around with me." Ling Han shook his hand and waved the whip so that it flicked towards the man. Because the whip's body was entwined with metal, it became the best conductor for lightning. The whole whip had turned white, lightning twined densely around it, and ancient patterns flickered on it. "Fuck!" the man cursed. There was lightning all over this place, which doubled the power of any thunder-aligned cultivator. They would be able to guide the surrounding lightning to complement their own attacks. Flower blossom tier cultivators could guide the surrounding spiritual chi to complement their own attacks. But this place had become an ocean of lightning. Cultivators aligned with any of the other 5 elements would not be able to borrow any kind of spiritual chi corresponding to their own elemental alignment, and would only be able to fight with their own power. This naturally was a great restriction on their battle prowess. But for thunder-aligned cultivators, this place was equivalent to a paradise. That man could only scramble backwards, so as to dodge this attack. Ling Han pursued him, and struck out again with his whip. His battle prowess had reached the peak of the spiritual infant tier, and added with the fact that there was lightning here to empower his own attacks, he was naturally capable of oppressing any spiritual infant tier, cultivatorinless the latter. 2. Possessed a thunder-aligned spirit base. How would that man be able to defend against him? Ling Han pursued closely, and the man retreated successively. The whip shot out with pops and cracks, and as lightning wrapped around it, it was a very terrifying thing to behold. The man's head was entirely covered with cold sweat. The lightning here was extremely terrifying, and like wading through a muddy swamp. Every step was a difficult one to take, as one had to defend against the surging ocean of lightning. This would consume greatly both one's origin power and stamina, which was why there was need to take a rest every few steps. But now, a whip was striking above his head like crazy, without giving him any time to breathe. Thus, he could only scramble forwards like a crazed dog. He could be no more battered than this. Damn it! Damn it! That man felt incredibly angered and humiliated. "Brat, don't go too far! I am a member of the Li clan of the Iron Tree Silver Flower. Our patriarch is an ultimate elite of heaven tier that the whole world reveres." "Oh, I'm so scared." As long as I kill you, I would remove any possible future threat. Ling Han said, smiling, striking out with the whip even faster. The man released a growl of humiliation. As people passed, many had witnessed his miserable appearance, and those looks of peculiarity were enough to make him feel incredibly furious and ashamed. Chapter 644. Someone interferes. Chapter 644. Someone interferes. Poor man! There wasn't even any cursing heard from him now, because he could barely breathe now. If he did not run, he would be struck with the whip, and not only would it cause heart-rending pain, it would even numb his entire body, so he couldn't even breathe. But if he ran, the lightning here was really too terrifying, which tired him greatly, and he was now entirely covered with sweat like it was raining. He was about to collapse from exhaustion. In terms of stamina, he was only slightly superior to any other person. How could he last under such torment? Body arts are really quite important. Ling Han nodded internally, instantly feeling that it was no loss that he had spent so much time on the indestructible Heaven Scroll and the 9 Dragons Tyrant Art. If he wanted to become a truly outstanding elite, he had to reach perfection in every aspect. Otherwise, you might look disdainful in this situation, but in another situation, it'd be game over for you. What kind of elite would that be? Don't hit me any more, that man pled. He was really about to become a dead dog now. He looked as if he had been fished out of the water, as his whole body was covered with sweat, and even his clothes had become wet. But he did not even have the time to curse, and could only continue to flee endlessly. You tell me not to hit, and I should obey? Who do you think you are? Ling Han asked calmly. Did everyone think he didn't have a temper? On the other hand, if he who had been the alchemy emperor in his last life really wanted to throw his weight around, it would be a bigger temper tantrum than anyone else. Pa, pa, pa. The whip struck a successive series of blows. The man began to throw up, blood not because he had been whipped, but because he had overexpended his stamina and was overloading his circulation. Isn't this Li Yuanming? There were 3 people who were resting some ways ahead, and when they saw that man, they stared blankly at first, thinking where had this beggar come from. But upon a closer look, they discovered it was actually someone familiar. Brother Chao Hung. Brother Chao Hung. When the man saw the speaker, he instantly felt as if he had seen his savior. He hurriedly leaped over, and was about to break into tears in his excitement. Brother Chao Hung, save me. One of the 3 people, a tall and sturdy man, stood up and made way so that Li Yuanming could duck behind him. He then raised his hand to catch the whip and said calmly, Young man, anyone can make mistakes. You should forgive them when possible. Don't be so pleased as to lose your own sense of measure. There was actually lightning also twined around his hand, but it was not white in color. Instead, it was blue. Pa! The whip fell, and the sturdy man took hold of it. The blue-colored lightning instantly crept up the whip, heading to attack Ling Han. Ling Han abandoned the whip and stood with his hands placed behind his back. At the first glance, it was obvious that the sturdy man had the upper hand, as he had forced Ling Han to abandon the whip. This was normal. He was a high-level spiritual infant tier cultivator, and in terms of density of origin power, it was obvious that he had more of an advantage. However, power and battle prowess were 2 different things. Ling Han's battle prowess was better shown through his use of 3 mystical powers, the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his sword techniques, the 10 spiritual flowers, and his strong physique. If he were to compete with a spiritual infant tier cultivator with brute force, that would really be comparing his weakness to his enemy's strength. Previously, Li Yuanming had been subdued by the lightning in this area, but this sturdy man himself had a thunder alignment and was naturally unaffected. On the other hand, there was an upgrade to his battle prowess. Kowtow and apologized to Brother Yuanming. And I can spare your life, the sturdy man said. His voice boomed, like it was the sound of thunder. Though Li Yuanming was internally very displeased and would prefer to kill Ling Han, it was already very nice of his acquaintance to give him a hand. It would not be proper for him to ask for too much. After all, he was one of the stronger members of this adult generation of the Zhao clan. The Hand of Thunder, Zhao Chaoheng, was considerably superior to himself, both in terms of reputation and status. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "You are not even familiar with the ins and outs of the story, but still command me to kneel and apologize. What a tyrant!" "So what if I am a tyrant?" Zhao Chaoheng asked coldly. It was not that he had very close relations with Li Yuanming, but both of them came from parties that possessed heaven tier level power and thus belonged to the same circle. The fact that Li Yuanming was thrashed like a dog was enough to cause him embarrassment as well. Thus, he definitely had to get him out of this predicament. "Then we'll fight." Ling Han was unafraid and raised his fists. He was only playing around when he was waving the whip, so how could he have possibly shown the true level of battle prowess? Zhao Chaoheng laughed loudly and said, "You were able to suppress Brother Yuanming merely because this is an area of lightning, and thus you gained a natural advantage. However, I too am thunder-aligned. In that case, cultivation level would be the deciding factor. I am in the spiritual infant tier, and furthermore, am in the 9th layer, so what do you have that could allow you to fight me?" "From my point of view, I think you are in the 9th layer of the chattiness sect." Ling Han teased, "If we're fighting, then let's fight, but you're still noisy. Tell me, what else could you be but in the chattiness sect?" Zhao Chaoheng's expression darkened. He casually tossed the whip back to Li Yuanming and gripped his hands into fists. Pa, pa, pa. The sound of his knuckles cracking was endless, and his whole body of muscles vibrated, showing that the power of his physical body was extremely shocking. Ling Han nodded internally. They were both from a powerful party, and were both at the peak of spiritual infant tier. But Zhao Chaoheng was a dozen over times stronger than Li Yuanming. That was because, even in a party with heaven tier level power, their resources would still be limited. Thus, these resources could only be concentrated on developing and nurturing those clansmen that had outstanding natural talent. As a result, though Li Yuanming's cultivation level had reached the spiritual infant tier, his battle prowess was appalling. This Zhao Chaoheng could not be underestimated. Ling Han similarly stretched out his tendons. Cracks that sounded like thunder rang out from within his body. Furthermore, it was even more astonishing than Zhao Chaoheng, and the noise was enough to make one's heart explode in their chest. They both cultivated body arts, but the 9 Dragons Tyrant art originated from the 12 Palace Halls, and was definitely in the immortal grade. Wasn't that awesome enough and sufficient to suppress all other kinds of body arts in quality? Zhao Chaoheng's expression changed slightly. He cultivated a body art, and so knew very well what astronomical sacrifices one had to make to cultivate body arts at the same time as normal cultivation. Firstly, there were not that many body arts techniques. If one were to cultivate a poor quality body art, it would be better not to learn in the first place, as it would be a pure waste of time and energy. Secondly, the moment their physique was established, the need for natural treasures would be too high, and the further they advanced, the more shockingly high their needs would be. Even for a party with heaven tier level power, they could only choose about 5 clansmen every generation to nurture. But this young man was obviously younger than himself and had a lower cultivation level than his, yet had surpassed him in body arts. This was something he could not accept. Could it be that he had come from an even more powerful party? It was the first time that Zhao Chaoheng felt that this was a troublesome matter. Perhaps he had really caught a hot potato with his interference this time, but now that things had progressed so far, he could no longer step back and could but grit his teeth and continue. "Make your move," he said. "You are only in the flower blossom tier, so I'll let you have the first 3 moves. You can choose to back out of a difficult situation. I only ask you to apologize to Brother Yuanming, and this matter would be considered over." Unconsciously, he had already conceded and made no more demands for Ling Han to kowtow and apologize. Ling Han merely had to apologize so that he could keep his pride and that would be fine. Yet Ling Han smirked coldly. Why did he have to give him face? Face was not something to be given by others, but to be earned with one's own power. With a long whistle, he shot out an attack at his opponent and said with a smile, "If you allow me to have the first 3 moves, I fear that you would have no chance to make your own move." "Han," I said, "I would allow you the first 3 moves, and I will. I zhao fuck." Zhao Chao Heng's expression changed drastically. Ling Han delivered a punch, and a dragon image of about 30 meters in height appeared. It was pale gold in color, and there was lightning entwining its entire body, which made for an incredibly terrifying sight. He hurriedly raised his fist in a counterattack. Too strong, he was really too strong. If he really allowed Ling Han to have the first 3 moves, he would be completely suppressed by the latter, and he would have absolutely no chance to make a comeback ever again. Chapter 645, Scared Off. Chapter 645, Scared Off. Pung, pung, pung. A fierce battle ensued, and lightning flickered, forcing the others to all step back. Only Hunyo was still standing on the same spot. As the waves of electricity passed over, there was not even the slightest effect on her. How could Zhao Chao Heng dare to allow Ling Han the first 3 moves? If he did, he would be trapped in an absolutely disadvantageous situation. Thus he could no longer bother about face, and shot out a shower of punches towards that dragon image. Is this the war elephant fist of the Earth Dragon sect? He was surprisingly knowledgeable, managed to recognize it from just 1 move. This was not the most top-notch secret technique of the Earth Dragon sect, and there were many disciples who knew this technique. Thus it was not strange that Zhao Chao Heng managed to recognize the technique. Ling Han did not answer. Since they were already fighting, defeating his opponent would be the most effective response. Zhao Chao Heng humphed. Although he dared not underestimate Ling Han any longer, it was not to the extent that he would actually fear Ling Han. As he waved his fists in attack, his battle prowess was not the slightest bit weakened, and he managed to tie with Ling Han. He was in the 9th layer of the spiritual infant tier. Furthermore, he had stayed on this cultivation level for a very, very long time, and had also tempered his cultivation to an incredibly pure level. Thus, with the advantage of being on a higher cultivation tier, he was not the slightest bit weaker than Ling Han. But this stunned him even more, because his battle prowess should definitely have been in the top levels of the spiritual infant tier. Yet a young man in the flower blossom tier was capable of fighting him on equal footing. This gave him a tremendous shock. This was practically inconceivable. "Junior, are you a disciple of the Earth Dragon sect?" He shouted out a question. If that was the case, he would say a few circumstantial words and not continue the battle. After all, the Earth Dragon sect was an even more powerful party than a party with heaven tier level power. Even if that Li Yuanming got whipped even worse, so what? "No." Ling Han said with a smile, "Guess again." "Guess your sister." Zhao Chao Heng did not say any more nonsense. He only continued to deliver punches. He planned to get the absolute upper hand in this battle and then call a ceasefire. In that way, he would not offend Ling Han, but would still retain his own face. As for Li Yuanming, this was none of his business in the first place, and it was already very kind of him to step out and give a hand. The 2 of them were embroiled in a huge battle, and in the end, the victor was still undecided. Zhao Chao Heng wanted to quickly end the battle, and immediately drew a long saber. There were closely interwoven patterns on the saber's blade. This was a spirit tool that he cultivated with his life force. It had originally been a normal tier 7 weapon, but after he had nurtured it for dozens of years, it had now evolved into a spirit tool. This was a spirit tool that he had nurtured himself. Even if there were 2 spirit tools that were completely the same, this blue thunder saber would be able to release even greater power in his hands. The answer was simple. It was most suited to himself. Ling Han glanced at it and could not help but smile strangely and asked, "You really want to compete in spirit tools with me?" With his saber in hand, Zhao Chao Heng's confidence soared. If it was similarly a level 7 spirit tool, This blue thunder saber of his could release 100% or even 120% of its full power. And if he was using a spirit tool that did not belong to him, the maximum amount of power that could be released would be only about 60 to 70%. Ling Han's right hand vibrated, and the demon birth sword was drawn. Wang, wang, wang. 3 patterns were lit, and instantly a terrifying aura spread out. This was a level 10 spirit tool, and even if Ling Han was unable to release its full power, the difference in level was still there. How could it be beaten by a 7th tier spirit tool? What spirit tool is that? Zhao Chaoheng's expression changed in shock. As a descendant of a heaven tier level clan, his eyes were naturally not too bad. He instantly recognized how extraordinary the demon birth sword was. You still want to fight? Ling Han gave the sword a shake with a smile and said, "Perhaps that saber of yours will be cut in half by me." Zhao Chaoheng instantly looked hesitant. If Ling Han was an ordinary flower blossom tier cultivator, then even if he wielded a level 10 spirit tool, Zhao Chaoheng would not be afraid because he would not be touched by the sword at all. However, Ling Han's battle prowess was enough to equal his own, and this would be a problem. Blue Thunder Saber was a treasured saber that he had nurtured for dozens of years. Even if there was only a slight crack on it, he would feel heartache. No, he decided to prioritize safety first. After all, he did not have too close a relation with Li Yuanming, but after some thought he still said, "Young man, Li Yuanming is a member of the Li clan, and the patriarch of the Li clan is a heaven tier elite. You had best not go too far." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I won't go too far. I merely want to kill him." Zhao Chaoheng's expression stiffened. "You call that not going too far? What would be considered going too far, then?" But whatever he could do and say, he had already done and said. There was absolutely no reason for him to battle Ling Han to the death, for Li Yuanming's Saki wasn't his brother-in-law after all. Li Yuanming was scared into taking a few hurried steps backwards. He suddenly turned around and ran. He did not want to die in the slightest. Ling Han did not pursue. He merely drew out the setting sun bow and notched an arrow. Xiao, the sharp arrow shot out, and lightning flickered around it, instantly increasing its speed to the maximum capacity. Pooh! It pierced through Li Yuanming's back, then through his heart, and with another piu shot out and stabbed into the firm mountain rock. Li Yuanming stumbled for a few steps before finally dropping onto the ground. Fresh blood seeped out and formed a pool beneath his body. His face was filled with regret. The two of them had not had any deep enmity, and he had merely blocked the way. If he had not been so domineering and put on airs with his identity as a member of the Li clan and wanted to take Ling Han's life, how could he possibly end in this manner? Yet no matter how much he regretted, it was useless. His eyes were open stubbornly, yet there was no longer any sign of life in them. Ling Han walked over and put away the arrow. This was forged from a level 7 previous metal. If he would consume 1 arrow every time he shot out an arrow, probably only the wealth of a shattering void tier ultimate elite cultivator could support such exorbitant expense. Zhao Chaoheng looked at Ling Han's back and suddenly asked, "Young man, how do I address you?" Ling Han turned back to look at him and answered, "Ling Han." "Ling Han." Zhao Chaoheng nodded and said, "I will remember this name. Young man, you are indeed very strong. Even if I have cultivated a few dozen years more than you, and am on a higher cultivation tier than you, you still battled me to a tie. However, there are really too many prodigies in this generation. My Zhao clan also has a super genius. His name is Zi Yuan. He is only 23 years old this year, but is already in the 2nd layer of the spiritual infant tier. His battle prowess is stronger than even mine." Ling Han grinned and said, "If there is a chance, I would like to spar with him." Zhao Chaoheng nodded. At the same time, he felt incredibly rueful. With his natural talent and ability, whichever time he was at in the last 10,000 years, he would definitely be considered one of the top-notch geniuses. But this era had received a time of great prosperity of martial arts, as if everything accumulated in the last 10,000 years had to be released. Not only was there a major improvement in the overall level of martial arts and power, 100 flowers bloomed in the younger generation with the successive appearances of various geniuses, who could easily stomp all over the previous generation with their superior strength. He was really born at the wrong time. If he could be born another 50 years later, how good would that be? Ling Han continued his advance. Hunyo held onto his hand as she ate various snacks. Rabbit, meanwhile, was on his other side. It was already feeling a great amount of pressure. The power of lightning was getting more and more fearsome. "We're about to arrive." Ling Han looked ahead and revealed an expression of happiness. The heaven cloud purple thunder was right ahead, and once fused, he would be able to cultivate a real body of lightning. In front of them, masses of people appeared. There was also a gigantic reservoir of lightning. Chapter 646, Clear Harmony Palace Hall. Chapter 646, Clear Harmony Palace Hall. This reservoir of lightning was at least 100 feet wide. On the other side of it, there was a cave. One side of the cave's entrance had collapsed, giving off a rather shabby feeling. Waves in the pool of lightning rolled tumultuously. There was terrifying divine lightning flashing within, making for a shocking sight. Many had gathered around it to observe. There were some that even wanted to force their way in, but when they reached the cave entrance and made an attempt, they immediately gave up. There were many signs of scorching and charring on them from being electrocuted, and they looked terrible. Ling Han looked at it and said, "I fear that the power of this pool of lightning has already reached the level of the deity transformation tier." Though the current young generation was catching up really fiercely, but even such geniuses that could be considered as belonging to the adult generation like the small Saber King and Lang Yutian had not managed to break through to the deity transformation tier. What more anyone else? However, it was all right even if their cultivation level had not advanced so far, as they could use treasures to compensate for their shortcomings. Ling Han saw someone take out an umbrella, open it, and enter the pool of lightning. As the flashes of lightning barraged it, this umbrella actually glowed with flickering light and became a shield that blocked all the incoming flashes of lightning. It was a girl. She was exceedingly beautiful and had a shapely figure. As she stepped on the waves of lightning, she was as graceful as a fairy that could enchant anyone. Wenren Qian Qian from the Wide Sun sect. What? I've never heard of her. Hee. Fairy Wenren is very low profile but has astonishing talent. She is extremely strong, and even she herself is as beautiful as a fairy from the heavens. She is not the slightest bit inferior to the Pearl of the Wang clan or the beautiful Pearl of the Hu clan. Whether she is strong or otherwise, I don't know, but she is indeed really beautiful. If you think she's pretty, you can go ahead. Fairy Wenren has said before, any man that can defeat her in a battle of equal cultivation level or at the same age range would be qualified to become her future husband. Really? Of course it's real. However, she did not say that you would definitely be able to marry her after winning, but merely that you would gain the qualification to. Even so, this still made many young men feel eager to give it a try. This Wenren Qian Qian was so beautiful she would make any man's heart tremble. The moment they closed their eyes, all they could see was her graceful demeanor and the extremely beautiful and elegant way she stepped on the pool of lightning. There was no way to erase that image at all. I advise you all to give up the thought. Jia Ming already has his eye on Fairy Wenren, and unless you all think you can compete with Jia Ming, it would be better for you to not waste your breath. Jia Ming. When they heard this name, a great many people looked astonished. This was a top genius that had obtained a direct ticket into the Restore Heaven Academy. Only in these 2 years had his reputation grown tremendously. Previously, he had been working hard on his cultivation in the savage, deep mountains, where he wrestled with various demonic beasts. Before then, he had never appeared in public. Precisely because of that, Jia Ming's bloodthirstiness was extremely high. He never knew when to hold his punches as he made his merciless moves. Who knew how many geniuses had died by his hand after his return 2 years ago? Some of them were even members of powerful parties and clans. Yet he had still remained safe and unharmed all this time. There was but one reason. Jia Ming was a disciple of the Earth Dragon sect. It was one of the 5 ancient great sects, and who would dare touch one of the disciples that had walked out? Furthermore, Jia Ming had killed them in one-on-one battles, which could be claimed to be extremely fair. What party would dare to suppress him? This was the benefit of having a powerful background. Otherwise, someone like Jia Ming, who did not have any scruples about murder, would have long since been killed off in secret. Everyone dared not speak careless words. Without any forewarning, Jia Ming would wound or even kill. He did not have reservations of any sort. If he found out that they bore romantic desires for Wenren Qian behind his back, he might hunt them down. This god of misfortune was really not someone to be trifled with. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Looks like some people have already gone in. The heaven cloud, purple thunder should be inside the cave, and this pool of lightning is merely a little bit power that has spilled out," Rabbit agreed. "Go, go, go." Hun Yo tugged Ling Han's hand and walked uncaringly into the pool of electricity. Ling Han stepped out, but the thunderclap ninth heaven was already circulating. His body exuded flashes of lightning. He could not possibly defend against lightning on the level of the deity transformation tier, but this lightning was not someone's attack. He would use his own electricity to defend against the lightning here, and merely ask to be able to safely cross the distance. Thus, the difficulty level was considerably reduced. But what was unexpected was that Hunyo's body actually became a bottomless pit. When flashes of lightning shot at her, they would be easily absorbed by her, making Ling Han stare with wide eyes. This was lightning on the level of the deity transformation tier. Putting aside Ling Han, even if it was small Saber King, he would have to be extremely careful. Hunyo, on the other hand, accepted all comers and absorbed them cleanly. When Rabbit saw this, it hurriedly hopped over. Behind Hunyo, a small path appeared in the pool of lightning. It was as if a supreme elite had forcefully sliced out a safe zone. But as Hunyo walked further away, this small path was quickly drowned by lightning, and it once again became a complete pool of lightning. Around them, the people were all in disbelief. However, their eyes were focused on Ling Han, as they naturally thought that this was something that Ling Han had done. Who would suspect a little girl who looked to be only 7 or 8 years old or a large white rabbit? With Hunyo leading the way, Ling Han soon crossed the pool of electricity and arrived at the entrance to the cave. "I am not full yet." Hunyo looked dissatisfied and turned back to look the pool of electricity behind her. Ling Han smiled and said, "Then you can go and absorb some more lightning." "Never mind. Better to help Nyo's Ling Han find the heaven cloud, purple thunder." Hunyo said very sensibly. This little girl was really becoming more and more adorable. Nyo is so obedient, so Ling Han definitely will marry Nyo in future." The little girl immediately began to make her own bargain. The two of them entered into the cave, and Rabbit, who did not have any rights, followed behind them. That was because the moment it wanted to hop alongside them, Hunyo would bite it and say that it was in the way. Thus, Lord Rabbit could only follow behind them obediently, feeling very unhappy. Just think, at the very least, it was still a powerful demonic best of the spiritual infant tier. So why did it have to follow behind a human brat that was only in the flower blossom tier? Look there! Ling Han's eyes swept over, and his figure had already leaped over. He saw that there were ruins ahead. It used to be some kind of construction, but now only the foundations were left behind. All around, there were worn down and broken walls. Who knew how many years ago this had happened? Is this the Clear Harmony Palace Hall? Ling Han mumbled to himself. He walked around in the surroundings and actually did manage to find a damaged door plaque in the ruins. However, there was only one word left behind: harmony. This had to be the Clear Harmony Palace Hall. Ling Han could absolutely confirm that this was the Clear Harmony Palace Hall that Zi Shuexian had mentioned. This lightning, these ruins, and this harmony, no such great coincidence existed in the world. After 10,000 years, a great change had indeed occurred. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. If it hadn't been for the fact that an earthquake had happened and the imminent appearance of a thunder spirit, would he have been able to discover this place? This mountain was huge. The inside of the mountain had practically been excavated completely. As a result, the internal space was also extremely massive. This Clear Harmony Palace Hall had not been built at the end of the cave, and there was still a very expansive space behind it. Ling Han hesitated. Was what Zi Shuexian had left behind inside the Clear Harmony Palace Hall, or deeper, inside the cave behind it? The message that she had left behind only mentioned the boundless mountains and the Clear Harmony Palace Hall, but did not provide clear details. After thinking for a very long time, Ling Han decided to first search around in the ruins of the Clear Harmony Palace Hall. Chapter 647, Thunder Lotus. Chapter 647, Thunder Lotus. Since the Thunder Empress had mentioned the Clear Harmony Palace Hall, this should be a key word. Otherwise, Ling Han could turn the boundless mountains completely upside down. For a flower blossom tier elite cultivator, it was really nothing too difficult to level a mountain. Ling Han struck out with his palm, and devastating sword qi surged forth. Poo, piu, piu. The bricks on the ground were all turned into dust. Hunyo puffed up her cheeks and blew out a hurricane that blew all the dust away. Ling Han destroyed again, and Hunyo cleaned again. Soon, all the ruins of the Clear Harmony Palace Hall were non-existent, and only rugged mountain rock was left behind. However, there was one brick that was not destroyed. Ling Han smiled. It looked like he had guessed correctly. It was possible that the thing that Zi Shuexian had left behind was hidden underneath this. He gripped that brick and lifted it, yet he discovered that this brick was extraordinarily heavy. No matter what he did, he couldn't move it an inch. Unconsciously, a competitive spirit grew, and with a loud shout he said, "Rise!" The combined use of origin power and pure brute force exploded with astonishing power. But the embarrassing thing was that the brick still did not move the slightest, as if it had fused with the mountain rock. Ling Han could not help but feel angry, and simply destroyed the surrounding rock, bypassing this brick. Poo, piu, piu. He destroyed some rocks, but soon realized that he could only dig about half a foot into the ground, and could not dig any deeper than that. The toughness of this mountain rock was not the slightest bit inferior to that brick. At least, he could do nothing else against it. Ling Han drew out the demon birth sword and slashed out at the brick. This time, there was finally some effect. A very light mark appeared on the brick. However, how long would he have to chop at it in this way? Ling Han decided to use the 10,000 techniques return to one to blast the brick. He had already condensed pseudo-ray now, and with 29 flashes of sword qi combined with 10,000 techniques returned to one, adding the sharpness of the demon birth sword, the combined destructive power should be incredibly terrifying. Let Nyo! Yet, Hunyo pounced over first and shouted loudly, "Stinky Rock, actually dare not to obediently break apart. Nyo's very angry. Nyo wants to chew you to pieces." "Kacha! Kacha!" She began chewing, and a terrifying thing happened. The rock shattered at the impact of her teeth. Hunyo, your teeth have become more powerful again!" Ling Han exclaimed in surprise. Previously, even though Hunyo's little white teeth were also forceful, but they definitely were not as astonishing as they were now. After absorbing the electricity, Nyo became more powerful. Hunyo said proudly and began to take big bites again. Soon, she had bitten a hole the size of a human face on that brick and buried her whole face in. No wonder her bites on Lord Rabbit's behind have become more and more painful. Rabbit could not help but rub its backside, its mouth twitching. Ling Han swept a glance at it and said, "You are a freak too. After being bitten by Hunyo so many times, not one bit of flesh has fallen off. You're definitely the first." "That's right." Rabbit could not help but look proud of itself. Lord Rabbit's ancestor is a prodigy and could claim to be an emperor among demonic beasts, invincible in his generation. With the effects of his bloodline, Lord Rabbit is naturally a monster. As they spoke, Hunyo's whole body had disappeared into the hole that she had chewed out of the brick. Then, with a putong, the tiny feet that had been protruding outside suddenly disappeared. "Ling Han, Nyo dropped down," Hunyo said delicately. The little girl had only chewed out a hole about the size of her own body, but that was all right. How could anyone in the flower blossom tier not be capable of twisting his bones? Ling Han used a powerful technique to squeeze his skeleton, and instantly every bone in his body gave off a chong, chong, chong sound, like a gong was being beaten. There was nothing to be done. He had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and the toughness of his skeleton was comparable to precious metal of the same level, so it was still slightly difficult for him to change the shape of his body. He stretched out his body so that it became thin, then slipped down through the hole that Hunyo had chewed out. Rabbit had a slim figure and had long since hopped down. It was unlike what Ling Han had expected. He had initially thought that there was a secret room underneath here, where the thing that Zi Shuexian had left behind years ago was, but who would have imagined that this was actually a passage? The way ahead was completely black, and who knew where this passageway headed to? Really, wasn't it just leaving a letter or something like that? Does it have to be so complicated? Ling Han mocked the situation as he advanced through the passageway. He looked closely and could see there were obscure patterns on all four walls of the passage and the floor. They were of a very high level, at least they were above the level that he had been in his last life. This should have been set up by the Thunder Empress after she had ascended to the shattering void tier. No wonder I was unable to destroy the mountain rock just now, since it had been refined by a shattering void tier ultimate cultivator. How could it be destroyed with my current capability? Still, Hunyo's teeth is really getting more and more powerful. Ling Han mused. The little girl's unique ability was endlessly displayed, and furthermore, it was getting more and more amazing. In the past, her little stomach was a bottomless pit, but that was only eating some food, and furthermore, there was an ending point, but now she could absorb easily even electricity on the level of the deity transformation tier. In the past, her teeth were indeed sharp, possessing destructive power on the level of 20 stars of the flower blossom tier when she herself was only in the spiritual pedestal tier, but that was only a breach of an entire cultivation tier. Now, though, she could even chew through the cave dwelling that a shattering void tier ultimate cultivator had set up even if more than 10,000 years had passed, and the strength was completely incomparable to when it was newly set up. Ling Han could only slice out a crack after so much effort. With such a comparison, Hunyo's monstrous strength could clearly be seen. Yet Ling Han was worried. This little girl was getting increasingly stronger. Was it because that human-shaped spirit base in her dantian had awakened? He absolutely did not think that it was a spirit base, but a spiritual form that had its own consciousness and will. When he imagined that Hunyo could possibly become a completely different person one day, an absolute stranger, Ling Han shivered and his heart felt pained. Hunyo's little nose sniffed. She clapped her hands and exclaimed, "Ling Han! Ling Han! Something in front smells nice." Ling Han smiled and forcefully dispersed his worries. He strode forwards and said, "This nose of yours is really good." "That's right, Nyo is the most awesome." The passage soon ended, and a wall appeared in front of them. It was very wide and tall. On the wall, there were innumerable small squares. There was a human face on every small square. They were both male and female, old and young, and as many as 999 faces. By the side of the wall, there was a small pool of electricity. A lotus flower actually bloomed inside the pool of electricity. The lotus flower had borne fruit, but what it bore was not a lotus seed head, but a round fruit about the size of a human hand. It was currently flickering with purple-colored light. The fragrance had precisely originated from the fruit. The pool of electricity had just about dried up, so they could clearly see that the lotus flower's roots were stuck in the bottom of the electricity pool. The roots were reddish-purple in color. Heaven, cloud, purple thunder. Ling Han gasped in surprise. Indeed, the heaven cloud, purple thunder had evolved after so many years, and he could see that it had reached the important moment in which it would transform into a spirit. The fruit that the lotus flower had borne was the thunder spirit. The moment it ripened, the fruit would split open, and the thunder spirit would be born. From then onwards, it would freely move unfettered in the world and become a real living thing. But at this moment, the thunder spirit had borne a fruit of Tao, and it was precisely the moment when its defenses were the weakest. If one were to pluck it and eat it, he would be able to obtain good fortune and gain unimaginable benefits. This was a life born from nature. It was unimaginably nutritious, and even shattering void-tier ultimate cultivators would be enticed. Ling Han, too, felt a rush of excitement and temporarily forgot the matter about the wall as his whole focus was concentrated on that thunder lotus. Pung, pung, pung. However, the sound of footsteps were heard from behind them. Chapter 648. Sword Maniac Lu Yuanshen. Chapter 648. Sword Maniac Lu Yuanshen. Though the hole that Hunyo chewed out was small, it was not a problem for a flower blossom tier cultivator. After transcending mortality, wouldn't it be a piece of cake if one wanted to temporarily change his physical frame? Ling Han turned around and saw a man stride towards them. Though it was a dark space, he was exuding divine light. He was tall and slender. His brows, eyes, and nose looked like swords. Even his lips looked like two swords stuck together. Such a man should give off an incomparably bizarre feeling. Wasn't that so? His whole body looked like it was about to become a sword. But when all these features were on him, it gave off an incomparable feeling of harmony. There was absolutely nothing strange. On the other hand, he seemed to have an indescribable charm to him. Moreover, others would usually store their weapon in their spatial spirit tools, and simply summon it out if they needed to use it. He, meanwhile, held it in his hand as if he could not leave it even for 1 second. He was practically a sword maniac. That man naturally saw Ling Han, Hunyo, and Rabbit as well. However, his eyes merely swept over them once. They turned to focus on that thunder lotus, and he calmly said, "You all may leave." "Fuck! Who do you think you are to dare to shoo away your Lord Rabbit?" Rabbit was instantly pissed off. The man actually did not get angry, nor did he become astonished from seeing a demonic beast speak. Instead, he said in deadpan voice, "I am Lu Yuanshin, nicknamed Sword Maniac. I am currently designing a thunder-aligned sword technique called Exploding Thunder Sword Technique. I need this thunder fruit to refine my sword intent." He really was called Sword Maniac. Could it not be so lacking in creativity? Ling Han mocked him internally, but said out loud, "You want to refine your sword spirit, but I, too, need to refine my body of lightning, so I cannot let you have it. Then there's nothing to be done. I can only kill you. You naturally would not need the thunder fruit by then." Lu Yuanshin said calmly without the slightest bit of anger in his tone. In his eyes, Ling Han could not see any killing intent. It was as if this was something very ordinary to him. He was indeed a sword maniac. His whole heart was focused on the sword. In his eyes, killing was not killing. It was simply sweeping away any obstructions on his path. Naturally, there was no killing intent circulating inside him, because there would definitely be no one out on a jog who discovered a stone blocking their path, yet would exude killing intent whilst planning to move the stone away. And Ling Han currently was such a stone. Ling Han summoned the demon birth sword and sighed internally. It looked like he would not be able to avoid this fight. What a fine sword! Lu Yuanxin stared at the demon birth sword, his eyes lighting up instantly. He could not help but say, "Can you let me study this sword for a while?" Ling Han's face twitched. "We are about to fight, and you have obviously declared your intention to kill me. Yet you actually want me to lend you my sword to study. Is there something wrong with your brain?" He shook his head and said no. "Why not?" Lu Yuanxin looked confused. In his eyes, treasured swords should be appreciated and should gain the admiration of all swordsmen in the world. Ling Han was rendered speechless. In the face of someone with such spine-chillingly low intellect, what should he say? A thought streaked in his mind, and he said, "If you defeat me, I'll let you admire it. Otherwise, how would you be qualified?" Lu Yuanxin stared blankly, then nodded in quick succession and said, "True, true. Such a treasured sword should not be admired by the common men. I must first prove my own ability." He, too, drew his sword, and what surprised Ling Han was that this guy's sword was actually made of wood. Ha 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 ha. Rabbit directly held its stomach in uproarious laughter. It flopped down on its behind on the ground and kicked its back paws in laughter. Lord Rabbit is about to die from laughing. There is actually someone that would use a wooden sword. Are you planning to kill or chase off ghosts? Yet there was not the slightest change in expression on Lu Yuanxin's face. He held the sword in hand, and the woodenness on his face completely disappeared. His brows and lips stretched out, and heroic spirit flourished. The sword intent all over his body became stronger. Ling Han did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Although his personality was a bit strange, his accomplishment in the sword arts could possibly be shockingly high. That was because there was usually only a slight difference between a genius and a maniac and a weirdo. "This is my self-invented oaken three swords," Lu Yuanxin said. He lightly shook the wooden sword, and immediately a few dozen illusionary images appeared. Those were the after-images he had left behind after making his sword vibrate too fast. Ling Han was astonished. One had to know that when the speed of wielding the sword reached a certain extent, a bottleneck would appear, the so-called limit. That was because there was a maximum limit to one's origin power, and there were also limitations to one's body. It was not possible that one's bones and muscles could support high-frequency vibration. Body arts were one solution, as they could strengthen one's physique and allow one to have the capability to break through these limits. But Lu Yuanxin obviously did not cultivate any body arts, yet was capable of surpassing his limits. This was naturally inconceivable. That was right. Why did he use a wooden sword? That was because a wooden sword was light. Otherwise, if it was a treasured sword forged from level 6 or 7 precious metal, it would at least weigh over 100 kilograms. Meanwhile, a wooden sword would, at most, weigh 1 or 2 kilograms. With high-frequency vibration, there would naturally be a world of difference in the burden caused by the two. Ling Han breathed in deeply. Mysterious 3000 was already prepared and ready, and he said, "Then let me experience it." Lu Yuanxin struck. Xiao, his whole body moved with his sword, and he instantly arrived in front of Ling Han. As his sword swept over, it was like a deity had descended. He waved out with his sword, and endless sparks of light showered, resplendent and bright. It could not be described with words. Ling Han huffed lightly, and the mysterious 3000 shot out. Xiao, 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 xiao. Pang, 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 pang. The sparks from the swords clashed, and an astonishing light shone. In the aftermath, a shock wave swept out and collided with this tiny little cave's walls. Thankfully, this cave had been refined by a shattering void-tier ultimate cultivator. If not, they would have both definitely been buried alive. As the sword's light surged past, Ling Han and Lu Yuanxin stood 10 meters apart. Their clothes had been damaged, and there was even blood spilled from both of them, but it was nothing serious. Ling Han felt incomparably astonished. The other was actually capable of taking on the mysterious 3,000. Though Lu Yuanxin's cultivation level was higher and had reached the 5th layer of the spiritual infant tier, Ling Han had used the mysterious 3,000. Furthermore, it was struck out with the demon birth sword, so it should have been sufficient to sweep aside all contenders in the spiritual infant tier. Powerful, he was really powerful. Furthermore, that wooden sword of his was not ordinary either. It was definitely not made out of any common wood, but rather a very high-level material for it to be able to parry the demon birth sword. More importantly, he had already condensed sword ray, and it was definitely nothing so simple as being condensed from merely 10 flashes of sword chi. It possessed terrifying power. With all these factors added together, Lu Yuanxin was capable of parrying the mysterious 3,000. Yet there was no change in expression on Lu Yuanxin's face, as if he was not the slightest bit confused why Ling Han could equal him when he was only in the flower blossom tier cultivator. He only released more sword intent, raised his wooden sword, and another slash was sweeping over. Ling Han circulated the thunderclap 9th heaven and used the demon fairy steps. His body suddenly sped up and retreated, letting this slash pass him by. He held his sword crossed over his chest, getting ready to use 10,000 techniques, return to 1. Lu Yuanxin also stopped, his face serious. He stared closely at Ling Han, and as he raised the wooden sword slightly, a green-colored light flickered at the point of his sword. My 3rd strike, harassing slash. No matter how fast your motion technique is, it would be useless, being locked onto by my sword intent. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, this slash will still catch up with you and strike. Ling Han was speechless. Couldn't you come up with a better name? Chapter 649, Shimin Jun. Chapter 649, Shimin Jun. Concentrate on the fight. Don't make me mock you. Ling Han shouted. Accumulating energy for 10,000 techniques returned to 1 would only take 1 to 2 breaths' time. Moreover, he could activate it no matter how little time he had used to accumulate energy, though the less energy gathered, the less the power released would be. Lu Yuanxin flew out, and as his wooden sword swept past, a wide sword ray slashed out, exuding a terrifying light. With a long whistle, Ling Han raised his sword to parry the attack. The moment 10,000 techniques returned to 1 was used, 29 flashes of sword chi condensed into pseudo-ray, and with the stimulation of 10,000 techniques returned to 1, this strike could pierce through even the defenses of the deity transformation tier. It was, after all, a level 10 spirit tool. Pseudo-ray and true ray collided, and endless sparks were roused, filling the whole mountain cave. When the light vanished, both Ling Han and Lu Yuanxin were visibly wounded. It was obvious that neither of them had gotten the advantage in the last strike. However, Ling Han's physique was really too strong. The wounds that he had were much lighter. Furthermore, he had also cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, so his injuries were currently healing at a very fast rate. Lu Yuanxin returned his sword to its sheath and said, "I am unable to defeat you." Ling Han nodded and said, "It would also be very difficult for me to defeat you." Currently, his trump card was no longer the 3 styles of black origin, but his 3 mystical powers. If he summoned the setting sun bow, and even used an arrow forged from a level 8 previous metal, with the simultaneous use of all 3 mystical powers, the power was naturally even higher. Lu Yuanxin turned around and left, without casting another look at the Thunder Lotus, seeming very free and at ease. This man was very strange, but met his gains or losses with equanimity. He was only too focused on his sword arts and could not understand human emotion. His emotional intelligence was really too low, but he could not really be considered as an evil person. The world was indeed big. There were innumerable able people as well as geniuses. He had never even heard of this Lu Yuanshen, but the latter had appeared just like that. Pa. Lu Yuanshen had just left, when the sound of footsteps were heard again. Was there no end to it? Ling Han hurriedly ran over to the side of the electricity pool and plucked that thunder lotus. This was not a real divine herb. It was merely a unique form taken by the power of lightning, a kind of metamorphosis. Thus, it was useless even if he wanted to plant it in the Black Tower, as it was impossible that a second one would grow. The thunder spirit had not yet successfully developed, so it naturally could not be considered a real living creature. It did not have any consciousness to speak of, and added with the fact that the pool of electricity had already dried up, Ling Han very easily plucked the thunder lotus and stored it into the Black Tower. He was not in a rush to refine it as of yet. The sound of footsteps neared. This time there were 5 people, 1 man, and 4 women. The man was extremely handsome, and the 4 women were very beautiful, but they were too flirtatious. Every move and gesture, every smile and frown made it seem like they were trying to seduce others. Their flirty temperament was ingrained bone deep in them. The man's gaze swept over, and when he saw the empty electricity pool, a cold expression appeared on his face. He shouted, "Are you the one who took away the heaven cloud, purple thunder?" Ling Han did not answer. Instead, he turned around to look at that wall that was covered entirely in human faces. "How dare you? My young master is asking you a question, and you dare not answer?" One of the women humphed. "Ugly woman, you dare to act fierce to Niu's Ling Han?" Hu Niu was abruptly angered and glared at the speaker, her killing intent flaring. Bite her to death!" Rabbit yelled out from one side, wishing for the whole world to be in chaos. Yet Hu Niu twitched her mouth and said, "She's too smelly, Niu can't bite." "Then why do you bite, Lord Rabbit, so happily?" Rabbit was about to die from fury. Rabbit meat smells nice, delicious. Hu Niu's eyes lit up. "You all!" The woman that had shouted in rebuke just now was enraged. This human and rabbit actually dared to ignore her? Hold on, a rabbit could actually speak. The man looked impatient. He said, "I am Shimin Jun, a disciple of the Wind Moon sect. Hand over the heaven cloud, purple thunder, or I will definitely kill you." The Wind Moon sect. Ling Han could not help but give out a ha, and asked, "Is the Wind Moon sect very awesome?" "Hung, my young master is the 4th disciple of the sect master of the Wind Moon sect. He has already broken through to the spiritual infant tier when he was only 34 years old. With that kind of cultivation level, he is qualified to rank as one of the topmost geniuses in the whole Middle State." A second woman praised. This was obviously very effective to Shimin Jun. He crossed his arms over his chest proudly and posed in a way that said, "I am very awesome. You all come and worship me." Ling Han said, "Looks like the sect master of the Wind Moon sect not only has a dead son, but will have one less disciple too. Such an evil, despicable sect. One day, I will definitely erase it cleanly." "W what?" Shimin Jun could not help but be shocked and cast a few more glances at Ling Han. "Could it be that you are the one who killed junior brother disciple Hu?" "Correct." Ling Han applauded. Shimin Jun instantly laughed loudly and said, "This really means the heavens are on my side. Master has already commanded that whoever can apprehend or kill the criminal that has murdered junior brother disciple, who will be the one he passes down the position of the sect master to. Today, not only will I get the heaven cloud purple thunder, I will also become the young sect master of the Wind Moon sect." He was too pleased. These were 2 happy events simultaneously happening. How lucky could he be? "Congratulations, young master." "No, it should be congratulations to young sect master." "Congratulations, young sect master." The four women all exclaimed in happiness as they all pounced over to offer a sweet kiss. Shimin-Jun did not refuse any of them, and his hands even groped all over the bodies of the women. If it was not for the fact that Ling Han was not dealt with yet, they were sure not to mind have a session of right on the spot. Ling Han covered Hunyo's eyes, and murderous intent appeared on his face as he said, "What an illicit group of man and women! It is a disrespect to the universe not to kill you, as the clear, bright skies would be hidden by the filth." Without a second word, the lightning on his body flashed and had already surged over. "How dare you!" The four women pounced out at the same time to counterattack Ling Han. Ling Han waved his sword, and as the demon birth sword danced, who would be able to stand against its might? Pu, piu, piu, piu. For heads flew up into the skies, and four headless corpses danced as their severed necks spurted out blood like crazy. No, Shimin-Jun roared in rage. Though he had no shortage of beautiful women, these four were his favorite. Not only were their looks above average, they were flirtatious and seductive. Their cultivation levels were not low, either, and they could frequently act on his behalf, saving him a great amount of trouble. "You deserve to die." He glared at Ling Han, his eyes about to spit out flames in his rage. "Die your sister." Ling Han charged again, and as the lightning on his body flickered, his speed was shockingly fast. Shimin-Jun could only parry based on his instincts. Two short hammers appeared in his hands. They were black, and there was a round pattern on the hammers which exuded a terrifying aura, making the hammers appear to be very extraordinary. Pung! Still, though he had managed to block Ling Han's sword, he was completely unable to disperse the terrible power behind this strike. His whole body was instantly sent flying by this blow. Pung! He crashed into the cave wall, and the impact caused a mist of blood to spurt out from all over his body. One had to know that this cave wall had been refined by a shattering void-tier ultimate elite, so how could it not be hard? Shimin-Jun looked astonished. He was in the spiritual infant tier, yet was actually unable to match a single strike from Ling Han. How could this be possible? There is nothing impossible. You are only the frog at the bottom of a well, so how could you possibly know what extent the truly strong elites in this world can reach? Ling Han brandished his sword again. The disciples of the Wind Moon sect were all shameless, vulgar people, and none of them was to be pitied for dying. Pooh! Shimin-Jun's head too flew upwards.